President declared victory and said that these states should stop counting and that the vote shouldn't count. Your reaction?
It was ridiculous, and he should not have done that. And he's being severely criticized by Republicans as well, that every vote ought to count. I see a number of prominent Republicans who have been tweeting out saying we're going to count every vote. And, this is what we have come to expect. But it won't matter, because I think we will count all the votes. The question is, what are the legal challenges that are going to be left over when we look at a place like Pennsylvania? It looks as though Michigan is trending Biden. It looks like Wisconsin is trending Biden, and that, coupled with Arizona, looks pretty good for Joe Biden. But we still have Nevada out there. Until they're all finally called, we don't know. Pennsylvania, the interesting thing there, and I've been talking, John, for months now about Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, and that's what it's come down to. And in Pennsylvania, the question is those votes that are outstanding in Philadelphia. So the president was wrong to do that. And, I don't want to call it yet, but what I will say is that is not helpful to getting people to respect one another. I just had a friend text me and say, it's so sad about how many votes Trump got. I said, man, figure out what those people are saying. Those people that live in rural America, what are they saying to the country? It appears as though they don't think they're being heard. We need to listen to them.
They certainly made a loud statement last night, louder than a lot of people may have been expecting. Maybe not enough to re-elect the president. That's what we're waiting to see. Governor John Kasich, always a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you.
Thanks, John,
very much for being with us. All right, where are we going now? Remind me. All right, we are watching the votes come in. Michigan still counting votes. Pennsylvania still counting votes. A lot of vote left to be counted there. The votes in both states, the vote by mail, urban population centers that tend to trend Democratic. Much more when we come back. John Berman here. I want to welcome our viewers in the United States and all around the world. It is 10 a.m. on the East Coast, 7 o'clock in the West, and this is CNN's special live coverage of a nail-biter of a presidential contest. No clear winner at this hour. So much up in the air. It's all coming down to a few key battleground states. Right now, Joe Biden has 224 electoral votes to the president's 213. And as the former vice president calls for patience and for every last vote to be counted, President Trump is falsely claiming victory. He hasn't won. Not at all. Sowing doubt in legitimate vote counting practices, and he's lodged baseless claims of fraud. Let's get straight to the numbers that tell the story of where we are. We'll begin with the CNN Key Race Alert. These are the states that tell the story this morning, starting with Wisconsin. Overnight, Joe Biden took the lead there. He is now ahead by 20,000 votes with 97% in, 10 electoral votes up for grabs. Not much vote left to be counted there. Really just provisional ballots. 20,000 might not seem like a lot, but it's about what Donald Trump won by 4 years ago. It's more than Democrats won by in 2000 and 2004. In Michigan, with 16 electoral votes up for grabs, about an hour ago, Joe Biden took the lead by about 9,000 votes. 90% of the vote in, 16 electoral votes up for grabs. The vote remaining, vote by mail, largely from urban population centers. Both of those factors have skewed Democratic. That's the story of the morning. Pennsylvania, we are waiting there. 587,000 votes separate Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Seemingly a comfortable lead, but again, with 76% of the vote in, the vote remaining from the key urban population centers, vote by mail, that could skew heavily Democratic. There's enough vote to make up the difference for Joe Biden. Can he pocket it all? We just don't know yet. Georgia, watching that very closely. This hasn't moved in a while. We're waiting on votes to come in from Georgia. The president ahead by about 103,000 votes, 92% in, 16 electoral votes up for grabs. The vote we're waiting on, urban population centers, vote by mail, that skew Democratic. That's why Joe Biden has a chance, maybe a good chance, still in Georgia. Other states we're watching very closely. Nevada, 6 electoral votes. This is razor thin. Joe Biden with a 7,000 vote lead. This is too close for comfort. All the election day vote is in there, though. The vote remaining, vote by mail, Clark County, both of which skew Democratic. But again, much closer than the Biden campaign wants. North Carolina, Donald Trump leads by 76,000 votes, 95% in, 15 electoral votes up for grabs. Both campaigns think this is tilting toward Donald Trump. We're watching that vote still. And then finally, Arizona. This would be such a crucial flip for Joe Biden from 4 years ago. He's ahead by 93,000 votes. That's actually shrunk. It was more a few minutes ago. He's ahead by 93,000 votes with 86% in, 11 electoral votes. If Joe Biden hangs on there, it changes the electoral college math in the entire country. This is the overall picture. Former Vice President Joe Biden with 224 electoral votes, Donald Trump with 213, but it's the states remaining that will tell the rest of the story. Let's dig deeper now. Let's walk over to the magic wall. Our Phil Mattingly is there. Phil, what are you watching?
Look, there's no question the story of the morning has been the inverse of what we saw last night, where states that reported vote by mail early looked good Democratic early, and then as the election day vote came in, it started to revert pretty strongly Republican. Now we've seen the inverse of that, with states, particularly Pennsylvania into the Midwest, where vote by mail was counted after the election day vote, have started out red and moved and shifted progressively over to the Democratic side. Let's start with the state of Pennsylvania. Right now, as things currently stand, 76% reporting, and as John just laid out, a pretty substantial lead for Donald Trump, 587,000 votes. But it's where that vote outstanding is and what it's comprised of that gives the Biden campaign some sense of optimism. I want to be very clear. This is a lot of ground to make up. It's a lot of ground to make up. Why there's a possibility here, why there's a pathway here, is there's somewhere over 1 million absentee ballots outstanding vote by mail. Why does that matter? Where they come from and how they were brought about. Vote by mail has skewed heavily Democratic. We have seen it repeatedly over the course of the last several hours as Wisconsin went from red to blue as vote by mail came in big Democratic counties. Same thing with Michigan. Will Pennsylvania be the same? We will have to see. Where is their outstanding vote right now? Well, let's start with Philadelphia. Largest county in the entire state. 12% of the population here, Look at this. Right now, only 56% reporting. That means there is a lot of votes to come in here, John. And I think you look at the margin as well. What was the margin back in 2016? Hillary Clinton did better. Democrats expect that margin to expand. They expect that turnout to go up. There is vote here, and it will be significant. Will it be 500,000 significant? Probably not in one county. But you push out in southeast Pennsylvania. Montgomery started to come in a little bit more. We saw the margin grow here. Move over to Bucks, a little bit of a swingier county, only 55% reporting. Democrats may lose Bucks. They aren't going to lose it like that. I don't think anybody thinks they're going to lose it like that as it currently stands. The point being, the Democrats look in southeast Pennsylvania, they look out in Allegheny County, the home of Pittsburgh, and they see a lot of outstanding vote in strongholds. The biggest question right now in the state of Pennsylvania is there are a lot of counties that Donald Trump is winning handily that also have outstanding vote. And this was the question for me throughout the course of the night. So take Westmoreland County. Back in 2016, he blew this county out of the water and once again is putting a huge margin on the board. But what we saw in Wisconsin and what we saw in Michigan is even in Republican counties and Republican strongholds, the outstanding vote was vote by mail, which even though it was in Republican strongholds, still skewed Democratic. It didn't flip the county by any means, but it did close margins and it did give votes to the bottom line of the Biden campaign. I don't know if that happens in Pennsylvania. We do not know the answer to that. We do not know if Joe Biden can close this gap. But we do know Democrats have a lot of vote outstanding in southeast Pennsylvania. They have a lot of vote outstanding in Allegheny County. And based on what's happened in other states, perhaps they have some vote in some Republican counties as well.
Let's talk about that. That's why Democrats haven't given up on Pennsylvania, because of what has happened in Wisconsin and what is happening before our eyes in Michigan. Let's take a look at Michigan if we can to get a latest update. Hasn't changed very much. Former Vice President Joe Biden ahead by about 10,000.
About 10,000 votes. And look, narrow. Does it sound familiar? 2016, Donald Trump won this state by just shy of 11,000 votes. Let me tell you why Democrats over the course of the night keep forgetting that, have become more confident in where this stands. Look, about 3 hours ago, Joe Biden was losing Michigan by about 220,000 votes. We have seen that progressively been eaten away at and then flip over the course of the last hour or so. Why? Same thing we were pointing to in Pennsylvania. Major outstanding vote. That vote came from vote by mail. The major places it came from, huge Democratic counties where turnout is large and still outstanding at this moment, even with 90+% in, Wayne County still has 30% outstanding. Look at this margin, 67-31, but more importantly, look at the top line, 447,000 votes. That's with 30% outstanding. There is significant Democratic vote via absentee and vote by mail, which has continuously skewed Democratic, that will come in here. So that margin of 9,000 is almost certain to grow bigger. The question for the Trump campaign is, okay, what are the outstanding counties? How can we try and match up with Wayne County, the kind of behemoth in the state? All right, look around here. You say, we've got red counties here. We've got red counties. Go to Kent County. Kent County, back in 2016, Donald Trump won this narrowly. Western part of the state, a little bit more of a conservative bent. 2020, bigger margin. Bigger margin, which is kind of a surprise because in the 2018 governor's race and some of the midterms, this was one of those counties that started to push towards Democrats. However, what's the outstanding vote? 83%. Where is that outstanding vote coming from? According to the Secretary of State, it's coming mostly via absentee ballots. It's coming from Grand Rapids. Absentee ballots skew Democrat. Grand Rapids skews Democrats as well. So even though it is in a Republican county, it looks like, based on past precedent and based on what we've seen over the course of the night, a large portion of that vote would likely be Democratic as well. So I think you're getting the dynamics of what we've watched play out in Wisconsin. We've watched it play out in the state of Michigan. We're watching it start to play out in Pennsylvania. Where it ends up, we don't necessarily know yet, but it has led Joe Biden to now lead in Wisconsin and Michigan.
Let's go way out west if we can and look at Arizona, because that total changed over the last few minutes. And I don't know why. It would have been a 130,000 vote margin. Now it's a 93,000 vote margin. Why?
Well, we're getting vote coming in, and I think the big question right now, if it's getting chopped into, it's either coming from Maricopa or perhaps it's coming from Yuma as well. It looks like it might be coming from Yuma. The biggest question for Arizona, look, the Trump campaign made very clear they were furious when other outlets, we have not called Arizona yet, when other outlets called Arizona because of the outstanding vote. Right now, 86% in, Joe Biden up by just shy of 100,000 votes. Biden campaign and Democrats point here, Maricopa County. It is the largest county in the state. It is 60% of the population. It is a county that has been shifting towards Democrats, finally kind of took the turn in the 2018 senatorial race. Biden right now with a comfortable margin. If you're winning Maricopa by 5 points, there's a pretty good chance you're going to win the state based on past precedent. The big question right now is, one, can Trump narrow that margin with what's outstanding? What's outstanding in Maricopa right now? About 14 points or so. Here's the problem with that. Maricopa, its outstanding vote, my understanding, is it's mail. It's mail, and mail has skewed Democratic. We'll see. Arizona does a lot of vote by mail, so it's a little bit different. It's a little bit different in how they do things. But can you roll up any type of bigger vote here to cut into 100,000? Look, Yavapai it's a Republican county. Can you start picking up vote here with what's remaining? Move over a little bit to the rural areas, Navajo County, 95%, not a whole lot to pick up there. Move over to maybe.
Right.
So I think the point is, this hasn't been called. That means Donald Trump has pathways. The pathways, though, largely involve closing the gap in Maricopa and then starting to pick up in your other red counties right there. Can that happen? It's up in the air. We have not called the race yet, so we'll have to wait and see.
All right, I'm going to make you go all the way back across the country now, back to Georgia, which a lot of people are looking at right now. The president ahead by 103,000 votes. This has been frustratingly static, I would say, over the last several hours. We've seen changes in Wisconsin and Michigan, even Arizona and Pennsylvania. They really haven't loaded any more vote here yet.
Right.
Where is it missing?
So let's go to what's outstanding, and it will look familiar to you. What's outstanding is largely blue and is largely their strongholds. We can come up to right here. Fulton's out a little bit. But look, the key for Democrats in this state, if it's for Democrats, Stacey Abrams, if she wanted to win, fell just short. It was blowout turnout in Atlanta and the metro areas. What are they doing right now? What's outstanding right now? Well, let's start with Fulton here and bring it out. 95% reporting. Fulton coming in pretty handily as they have started to count. Interested about that a little bit. But you look at the margin, 71.8% to 27%. What's outstanding? Doing better than Hillary Clinton. Here is the big one that Democrats want to pay attention to. DeKalb County, fourth largest county in the state. You look at the numbers right here. If you're trailing by 100,000 and there's 20% outstanding, and your expectations are this margin is going to hold or grow, that is a place for growth for you. Also, though, you take a look at these outstanding votes right now. Richmond County, home of Augusta. Look at the margins. Again, not huge. You're not going to cut 100,000 votes right here. You pick up 10, you pick up 15, maybe. Go down here to Savannah. Same story. Again, not huge, maybe 4,000 or 5,000 votes. So the bottom line is there a pathway? We don't know. We know there's enough vote outstanding. We know a lot of that vote comes from Democratic strongholds. Will that be enough to overcome 103,000? We will have to wait and see. Democrats feel like they have a very real chance here. Republicans feel like Georgia went better than maybe they thought it was going to, at least originally.
They were worried. They were actually worried heading up until election day.
Genuinely worried.
But
we will see, though, how it turns out when those kind of Democratic stronghold counties start to come in.
All right. I want to look at this now on the terms of if it were to end like things stand now, who would win? Now, that's not the case. Let's stipulate. We know there's still many votes to be counted. But given where things stand now, who would be winning?
Now look, as someone who's been standing here for the last 8 hours, I can tell you things will shift. Things will shift, but the shifting has started to narrow. The opportunities for shifts, I guess, have started to narrow. So let's kind of work through the map. Everything you see filled in has been called. If it's blue, it's been called for Biden. If it's red, it's been called for President Trump. Right now, Biden is at 224 electoral votes. President Trump, 213. We can go ahead and stipulate that, say, President Trump wins Alaska. Right? We'll give him that. We'll give him North Carolina as well. He's got a pretty solid lead there. Republicans feel very good about things. We will give Vice President Biden Maine. We will also give him Maine too. There we go. There we go. So where does that leave us? Well, Vice President Biden is leading in Arizona. Give him Arizona. Again, we're not calling these races. We are playing out scenarios and pathways. Right now, we talked about Nevada. Very close. Way too close for Democratic comfort right now. But you kind of laid out the dynamics of how that race is working right now. For the sake of doing this, we will give Vice President Biden Nevada. Look what's left. State of Georgia, state of Pennsylvania, state of Michigan, state of Wisconsin. Where does Joe Biden lead right now? Joe Biden leads Wisconsin. Joe Biden leads in Michigan. Where does that put Joe Biden?
271 electoral votes.
Puts Joe Biden at 271 electoral votes. So,
and in the White House.
And in the White House. And again, this is not done. This is a pathway. And if you're the Trump campaign, you are keeping a very close eye on Nevada. You flip Nevada, that changes the dynamics of everything. You are hoping that there's something there in Maricopa that you can pick up in Arizona. And you're saying, Michigan, we'll see what happens with Wayne. 9,000 votes isn't a whole lot. Wisconsin, 22,000 votes. not a whole lot, although I think Craig Gilbert, legendary
Yep.
Wisconsin reporter, was saying this would be the third closest race.
Yeah, it's not even that
Since
close to
2000.
Wisconsin. It's not the closest race to Wisconsin.
And obviously, we haven't even factored in Pennsylvania, which a lot of people thought was a must-win for both
The important thing
campaigns.
is here for the Biden team is if you're looking for paths, they can get to 271 without Pennsylvania and without Georgia, which is why they're watching all this so closely. The margins are so narrow. Nevada and Arizona will be counting after the day. I mean, it'd be shocking to get a call today. We don't know.
No.
We just don't know. The votes are still coming in. Nevada, I should note, and you can click on Nevada if you want. This margin is like 7,000 votes at this point. Nevada, all the election day vote has been counted. All of it. All that's outstanding is some vote by mail, largely in Clark County, which has tended to skew Democratic. Vote by mail itself tends to skew Democratic. So this is close. Oh, by the way, Harry Reid once won one of his races by less than 500 votes.
Right.
So Nevada can be close. It can be close. But this could grow for Joe Biden. The Biden team is certainly hoping it'll grow, but it's much closer than they want.
Much closer than they want. And look, the Trump team was telling everybody who would listen, Nevada's in play. Everybody in their analysis or their analysis and in their maps and everything like that kept giving Nevada to Joe Biden, in large part because of Harry Reid's organization. Harry Reid changed Nevada into a place that Democrats thought they had on lock based on their early vote turnout, and in large part because of Clark County. Clark County, you put up 10, 11-point margin here, ball game. Biden had a 10, 11-point margin for much of the night. By this morning, Biden no longer had a 10 and 11-point margin. So you lay out the key dynamics and the fact that the outstanding vote, mostly from Clark, mostly vote by mail. We will see how that composition turns out when it comes. That has skewed Democratic throughout the course of this morning. We'll see if it does when it comes in. If you're the Trump campaign, you are hoping and praying that it does not, because if it does not, and you have a shot in Nevada, you change everything in the map we just laid out. But as it currently stands, the Biden campaign probably in a better position based on everything we've been looking at over the course of the last 12 hours or so than the Trump campaign when it comes to Nevada. But we'll have to wait and see.
Look, as I said, every state that's outstanding now changes everything for both candidates at this
100%.
point. As I was saying, in 2000 we had Florida, in 2004 we had Ohio. We have 6 Floridas and Ohio's at this moment that we're watching closely that could be decisive. We just don't know at this point. I'll let you go back to counting, Phil, because we want to know the very latest as these votes come in. In the meantime, I'm going to go to Jessica Dean, who's following the Biden campaign in Wilmington, Delaware. And I understand, Jessica, they're giving an update now?
Yes, they're actually doing a briefing right now that they are streaming with the campaign manager and one of their senior advisors, John. We are hearing a lot of optimism, a lot of confidence from the Biden campaign this morning as these votes continue to be counted. One top advisor telling CNN that they expect to win today. We also were told by a Biden official that this race is moving to a conclusion, and they believe it is moving to a conclusion in Biden's favor. So let's break down why they are saying that, why they think that's where this race is going. They believe that they will win Wisconsin. They really like the vote by mail situation in Michigan. They're feeling confident there. They believe they will win Pennsylvania, Nevada. So they're putting all of these things together. And on this briefing right now, they are going through, much like what Phil and you and John just did there, going through county by county, what's still outstanding. I talked to an aide this morning that told me based on what is still out there and what has been reported that they feel like they are on the right track, that this is going in the right direction for them. They also have an eye, of course, on Georgia. They're looking and keeping a close eye on Fulton County down in Georgia as those returns continue to come in. But the Biden campaign still urging patience, as Joe Biden has all along and said last night, urging patience. But they deeply believe that this is all going to come to an end, and that when it does, that Joe Biden will have the 270 electoral votes needed to go to the White House. John.
All right, Jessica, please keep us posted in Wilmington, Delaware. Let's go right to the White House and get the Trump campaign side of things. Jeremy Diamond is there. What is the campaign, or I suppose the White House? And frankly, there's no difference right now because they're running the campaign, maybe in violation of the Hatch Act, out of the White House. But what are they saying, Jeremy?
Yeah, the Trump campaign just had a hastily organized call with reporters. They did not take any questions from us. But what they did do, John, is they expressed confidence in their data, confidence in their math, and projecting confidence in a path to victory. Specifically, what the campaign manager, Bill Stepien, said was, we look at the numbers and we are very confident in our pathway. We are confident in our math. And what they're confident in, John, is in some of those remaining states that CNN has yet to call. They believe that there are more votes that remain than have been estimated in the state of Arizona, and that will ultimately help them narrowly edge out Joe Biden there. They're also expressing confidence in a victory in Nevada, which is much closer, of course, than what we were expecting. And they're also projecting confidence in Pennsylvania. But as it relates to Pennsylvania, they were using some very specific wording. And that is that if all legally cast ballots are counted, then they will win. If illegally cast ballots are counted, they are not so sure they will win. And what that comes down to, John, is the president's complaints and his campaign's complaints about the Supreme Court decision as it relates to Pennsylvania, and it seems as it relates to counting ballots that were postmarked before Election Day, but that arrived after Election Day. Those are still, as of now, unless the Supreme Court reverses itself, those are legally cast ballots, and we do expect those to be counted in Pennsylvania, which suggests that perhaps the president will lose Pennsylvania if indeed those votes are allowed to be counted. But again, it is notable to see this campaign expressing this kind of confidence. Obviously, they're trying to counter what we are hearing from the Biden campaign and the fact that the momentum appears to be shifting in Joe Biden's direction. But that is what they are saying as of now, John, projecting confidence in the math and confidence in a pathway to victory.
Yeah, we have no idea how many votes are going to come in Pennsylvania legally today and tomorrow and the next day because they're not in yet. So we just don't know how much of a factor they will play, if at all. But the Trump campaign clearly already trying to game it out and besmirch the whole notion of it, even though they are legal, so says the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Jeremy Diamond, thank you very much. So while these votes continue to come in, I want to bring in CNN senior political commentator David Axelrod and CNN political correspondent Abby Phillip. I watched both of you on TV last night. You were phenomenal. A little bit of a different story as we wake up this morning than maybe when you went to bed, if you went to bed. David Axelrod, 30,000-foot view, what are you saying?
Well, first of all, it is a different story, but it shouldn't be a surprising story. It's the story that we anticipated because of the way people voted in this election. It was always going to be the case that these mail-in ballots, because of the refusal of legislatures in these states to let them be processed earlier, would be processed after the election, and that they were going to skew heavily in favor of Biden because more Democrats voted by mail than Republicans. The President of the United States knew that when he spoke last night. He knew that about Pennsylvania, he knew that about Michigan, he knew that about Wisconsin, and he knew that when these votes came in overnight, that it would likely change the picture there, and it did. And what we've learned is that these battleground states are battleground states for a reason. They're close, and ultimately they may tip in Joe Biden's favor. It looks favorable for him in Wisconsin and Michigan. Now in Pennsylvania, it looks very much up in the air. But they are going to be close races, and they will tell the story.
Abby Phillip, it's interesting hearing from both the Trump and Biden campaigns this morning. I covered George W. Bush in 2000. I lived through the recount, and I have the scars to show it. One of the things that was learned there is you've got to be aggressive out of the gate. You've got to come out and not do what the president did, which is say stop the counting, declare victory, but you've got to project optimism and you've got to be aggressive, which is why I think we've heard formally now from both campaigns before 10:30 a.m. the next day.
Yeah, there's a reason that the Trump campaign called their briefing literally for 5 minutes before the Democrats were holding their briefing. So yeah, everyone wants to control the narrative this morning. But that being said, the reality is the votes need to be counted and we need to see what the votes say. It does not matter what narrative either campaign wants to draw this morning. We need to see what the votes actually say. I cannot emphasize that enough. But what I will say this morning, based on what the Trump campaign is already signaling they are going to do, they're talking about recounts in Wisconsin. They're saying these races are so tight that they might challenge it. Look, Joe Biden right now, as we're speaking here, last I checked, he had a lead in Wisconsin of about 20,000 votes. 4 years ago, Donald Trump won the state of Wisconsin by about 22,000 votes. I say all that to say, it's a very similar story in Michigan. I say all that to say that the reality is that President Trump won the presidency on very, very narrow margins. We could also see very, very narrow margins in this race as well. We could not see very narrow margins. But my point is, you can't be talking about recounts right now as we sit here, as we stand here, because it is just too early. The votes have not been counted, and that's all about spin, and we need to wait and see what the votes actually say.
Can I just say that Abby was all over this last night. This is also not a surprise because the president has been signaling this for months. He understood what his political situation was, and it was very clear that he was going to challenge these results on this basis. He was setting up the predicate for it, and I think there are two reasons. One is, he thinks this is the only way that he can win. But the second reason is, I think if he loses this election ultimately, there are only two options for Donald Trump: either he wins or it was stolen. There's never a third option, which is that he lost. Being a loser is just an unacceptable outcome for this president, and so they're going to kick up as much dust as they possibly can, regardless of where these numbers land.
And we don't know where they'll land. It's truly an extraordinary thing we are witnessing this morning. The swings over the last 12 hours have been remarkable. There may be more to come. Abby Phillip, David Axelrod, stand by. We're watching more vote come in. We're waiting to hear from Pennsylvania election officials, including the governor there. We'll get an update from a state where they're still counting, still hasn't been decided. Our special live coverage continues right after this.
Rare. Using a rare weapon. Finishing. Okay, forget about it. Wow, that's a lot. 5 kill. Hmm. 10 kill. Finish him.
All right, welcome back. This is CNN special live coverage, 10:31 a.m. on the East Coast. Why am I giving you the time? Well, if you managed to sleep last night, things changed. You may have gone to bed thinking this election was headed one way, and then you woke up and you saw things were different and maybe trending increasingly in another direction. Phil Mattingly at the Magic Wall, you've got a neat tool to show this.
Yeah, look, so this is the map right now, right? We've been talking about this for the last several hours. It shifted in the last several hours, but what was happening beforehand? You can talk to a lot of people who, if they were big Trump fans, big Trump supporters, went to bed probably pretty happy. Big Biden supporters, not super happy. So let's kind of track through this. I want to walk through how things have changed. This is at 1 a.m. in the morning. Look at Nevada, look at Wisconsin, look at Michigan, look at Pennsylvania. No, just keep Pennsylvania where it is. Flip to 2. All of a sudden, Nevada flips. All of a sudden, Wisconsin starts to flip. Sorry, this is 5 a.m. This is 5 a.m. One more. Michigan as well. So I'll take all these off, and I want to watch it again, because just the progression throughout the night, as we were live on television talking about this as it happened, as things looked very, very good for the Trump campaign, particularly in the Midwest, Pennsylvania into the Midwest, Nevada as well. So we're waiting for vote to come in. 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 9:05 a.m., and you just watched it. And we talked about the progression over the last several hours. The progression in Wisconsin, the progression in Michigan, progression that may be happening in Pennsylvania.
There's a reason for it. Explain.
Yes. So, look, the best way to do this, let me turn this off for a second, is I want to open the state of Ohio. And we've done this a couple times, and I think this is just the best demonstration. Because for a lot of people who were paying attention early in the night, they were looking at Ohio, and they were looking at the turnout in Ohio, they were looking at the suburbs of Ohio, and they were saying, think back to 2016, Ohio. Donald Trump looked like he took it off the swing state map. I'm an Ohioan. I was stunned by the Martian in the state of Ohio. And early in the night, as the early vote was counted and released by Ohio, it looked like this was going to turn blue. Maybe had a chance to turn blue, but at least narrow tremendously. This is what happened. Looks pretty familiar.
Same
right?
thing as last time.
Happened in North Carolina as well to some degree, saw it a little bit in Georgia, somewhat in Florida. Basically, it was what kind of vote you were counting when dictated what this was going to look like. So that was Ohio. We have seen the inverse over the course of the last several hours with these states, with Wisconsin, with Michigan. Right now, Pennsylvania is still red, but starting to shift as well. Why is that? They counted Election Day vote first, in-person vote first. That, throughout the course of the night, throughout the course of the country, east to west, skewed heavily Republican. And that was by design. President Trump worked on that in person. They blew out their in-person goals almost across the country. What was left? Well, the opposite of what was happening in Ohio. What was left was early vote. How did early vote skew? Very heavily Democratic. Where did it come from? Largely urban population centers, largely suburbs. In other words, Democratic strongholds in these two states, and we're still watching as it happens in Pennsylvania. Just a couple of hours ago, Pennsylvania was about 630,000 votes. 630,000 votes. 550,000 is still a huge mountain to climb for Joe Biden.
But it's 80,000 less.
But it's 80,000 less, and that has happened in the course of an hour. And why is that happening? Because mail-in ballots are coming in, more than 1 million mail-in ballots outstanding, in large part from southeastern Pennsylvania, Democratic stronghold, Allegheny County, Democratic stronghold. So that's the progression. That's why it happened. That's why you've had, sometimes it looked red and then all of a sudden it flipped blue, sometimes vice versa. Nothing's wrong, nothing's different. What's different about this election is when things are being counted.
All right, Pennsylvania election officials, that's the Governor Tom Wolf briefing now. Let's listen.
Of the night, and we still have work to do. So I want to start by saying thank you to all the staff, the volunteers who work so hard to count those votes and are still working hard to count them. You know, the promise of democracy is that every vote counts, and that has been the promise of democracy since 1787. And it's still the promise of democracy, and I intend here in Pennsylvania to make sure we keep that promise. So, as I said, counties continue to report results, and again, these results are coming in more slowly than they have in the past, so we have to be patient, but confident that these votes are going to be counted. They're going to be counted accurately, and they will be counted fully. The delay that we're seeing is a sign that the system is working. This is a new system. We went into effect with Act 77 last year, and there are 3 million millions of mail-in ballots that are being counted, and that takes longer than the way we used to do it with the stand-in in-person voting. So we may not know the results even today, but the most important thing is that we have accurate results. Again, even if that takes a little longer than we're used to. Make no mistake, our democracy is being tested in this election. This is a stress test of the ideals upon which this country was founded. And the basic rule of one person, one vote, that still carries, and it has to carry here. Our democracy has withstood challenges before, and for over 200 years, we have upheld and strengthened our commitment to basic fairness and due process. And I have full faith that we will similarly meet this moment, and I will do everything within my power to ensure that the results are fair and that every vote is counted. Pennsylvania will have a fair election, and that election will be free of outside influences. I will vigorously, and we all will vigorously defend against any attempt to attack that vote in Pennsylvania. And every Pennsylvanian can have confidence in the outcome of this election due to the diligence of the county election officials and the hard work of Secretary Bookvar and her folks at the Pennsylvania Department of State. So thank you again to all Pennsylvanians who voted. Rest assured your vote will be counted. If it hasn't already been counted, your vote will make a difference in this election. This is the way we elect our officials. This is the way we hire the people who are our public servants. It's a promise that we give to all Pennsylvanians, all Americans, that their vote counts, and I intend to keep that promise here in Pennsylvania. Now I'm proud to turn this over to Secretary of State Kathy Bookvar. Sorry.
That's it. Good morning. So I want to echo some of what Governor Wolf said about, once again, thanking all the, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of election workers that were and are still involved in the process of enabling this great democracy in Pennsylvania and across the nation. The work they have done and continue to do is just tremendous. And, we've been talking, Department of State folks were, at our operations center, 4:30 in the morning, went to take a shower, and we're back within a couple hours of that. So I've been working around the clock, as are many of the counties, and we've been talking about yesterday again, and how incredibly smooth. It's one of the smoothest, least issues presidential elections than I've seen in any time that I could possibly remember. And I've been in and around elections for a long time as a voting rights lawyer and a poll worker. This was incredibly smooth, and that's a huge credit to all the election workers, both at the state level and at the local level, as well as our state partners like PEMA and Office of Homeland Security, Department of Homeland Security, who made sure that all those things that people were worried about, whether it was voter intimidation or issues at the polls, really could not have gone more smoothly in the middle of a global pandemic with all the voting reform changes that we saw from Act 77 and Act 12. So that's huge kudos to everybody involved. Also, we are exactly where we said we would be. So we said it was going to take some time to count the mail ballots, and we are approaching 50% of the mail ballots counted, which is great. As you know, you can go to our Election Night Returns website and the supplemental dashboard to get the greater details on that. But there are still millions of ballots left to be counted. So the counties are working incredibly hard. You're going to see a lot of updates in the next couple of hours and throughout the day. We have been, there were a number of counties that made some major additions in the wee hours in the morning. So if you checked kind of early on this morning, you may want to check again because there's already been more ballots accounted for on our dashboard. Again, this is a process. We've got, somewhere, I don't know what the totals are going to end up at, but somewhere between 2.5 and 3 million ballots. And as I've said many times, we had 260,000 ballots cast by mail in 2016. So we will be at 10 times the number of mail ballots, and the counties are already approaching 50% done. So I urge everybody to remain patient. As Governor Wolf said, we are going to accurately count every single ballot. The vote count, as I've said many times, is never done on the day of election night, and the counties are doing this accurately and then accurately as quickly as they possibly can. And again, I'll also just remind everyone, military and overseas ballots are not due until a week after Election Day. So next Tuesday is the deadline for military and overseas voters to cast their ballots. And we want to make sure that not only every civilian absentee and mail-in valid voter is counted, but also that every man and woman who are serving our country, that their votes are counted. So thank you, and we are happy to take questions. Should I stay?
Sure. I'm sure you want to talk to Kathy. Any questions? Dennis?
Can you tell us where we stand right now and what you know of challenges, legal challenges from the Trump administration, and how are you preparing to deal with those?
Okay.
So I think, basically what you know that's been publicly reported, that's really all we have at this point. So, and I can't talk about active litigation, unfortunately. So you could, but as things are filed, of course, those will be publicly accessible.
Do you have attorneys that are going to handle that, or are you bringing in somebody from the outside, and who would that be?
We have a mix of, what we've been doing all along with all the litigation that's been flying this year is we have a mix of in-house and outside counsel. Plus the Attorney General is also representing us in a number of these things. So there's been a great team. I have to say the attorneys, I'm just going to give a shout out to the legal team in the Department of State who have been really put to work this year, and they are amazing. So Tim and Kat and team, thank you. But we also have tremendous teams of outside counsel who've been involved in all of this. And as the governor said, we will make sure that every vote is counted. Every eligible voter has the right to cast their vote.
So how many counties are handling ballots that are coming in Tuesday, Thursday, Friday? How are they handling that? And is each county setting them aside? How is each county doing it?
So you can go online to see our guidance. And then last night we also gave sort of more technical technical guidance to the counties, which we can forward to you. It lays out the process. So you're talking about the late arriving ballots. So everything's going to be segregated. I'm not sure if you were here yesterday, but all those ballots will be segregated, but they will be counted, and the counties have been given detailed instructions, which again you could find in those guidances to walk them through how to segregate those races, those ballots. Sorry.
Can you talk about the order in which those things will be counted? I mean, is that a county by county decision? Can we expect to see those numbers being already reflected, or is that something they would get to later in the process?
Yeah, they'll get to, so basically it's going to depend, right? There's some counties that are already done counting their mail-in ballots received before 8 p.m., so those are going to start sooner, but they won't be reflected on the website. They won't be like intermingled in the website as you see it now. They will be segregated. So, but it is going to vary from county to county when they start because they're working on the other ones first.
How it will be reflected on the website, though? I'm unclear on that.
Well, I think stay tuned on that. Yes.
So on those segregated ballots, there were 500,000 ballots issued that hadn't been cast as of yesterday.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sorry, there were 500,000 mail ballots issued that hadn't been cast as of yesterday. Is there a way for the state to determine how many of those 500,000 people chose to vote in person instead, or do we need to operate under the assumption that all 500,000 could come in before Friday?
So all that will be trackable, but we won't have it today. So basically between provisional ballots and the poll books, and then of course the mail-in ballots, as you all know, like only one vote can be counted for any voter. So you'll be able to see all of that, but it will take some time for that data to be quantified. Yes, sir.
Last night, I think your comment was that we didn't know how many mail-in ballots had arrived yesterday, right? Do we know yet how many ballots arrived yesterday? What is the number of mail-in ballots?
I don't have that with me this morning, but check on the dashboard, and that will be updated throughout the day. Yeah, sorry. Jan?
Representative Benninghoff keeps raising this point about how ballots that arrived yesterday that can still be counted may not have a legible postmark on them, and raising questions about whether or not they should be counted or not. And he said it's because of the prepaid envelopes that the state provided. I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Sure. So I'm not sure, he may be confusing. So anything that arrived yesterday, it doesn't matter whether it's postmarked or not. Anything that arrived yesterday is a valid vote. That's what Pennsylvania law has always been, right? So talking about the late arriving ballots. So the postmark, first of all, the way we did prepaid postage in Pennsylvania is we went to the counties where they are. So if they wanted it to be through their business reply mail, USPS permit, we did it that way. If they wanted to literally have us reimburse them for stamps or metered postage, we did it however they want. So some of them are not even, and I don't remember how many, but we could get you that information, how many counties are using business reply mail. But those are still postmarked. They have timing marks, they are date stamped, they are still trackable by date. So it's a tiny fraction of any of those things, whether it's business reply mail or regular mail. I mean, we've all had that situation where you get a letter and it's not postmarked. It's rare, right? Same for business reply mail. They do what's called a timing mark, so that's just, it's not accurate. They're all stamped.
No mark on it. If it is one of those rare occasions, would it be counted?
So under the current Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision, which is currently the law, yes, as long as there's no affirmative evidence that it was postmarked after November 3rd, as long as it's received by November 6th at 5 p.m., it will be counted. Yes.
It's my understanding that the state's website is showing 18 counties with 0% mail-in ballots counted. Is that accurate? Do you have any insight into that?
So, what I would suggest, sometimes counties are uploading on their own websites and haven't transmitted the file to the Department of State because, they have their own local races. So I urge you, if you see any, and this is what we're going to be doing throughout the day, go to the county website. You should always do that. It's a great way to double check. But we're going to be following up with all those counties to say, hey, make sure you get us the files. Some of them, this year, because for the first time, we had a website that was going to itemize the mail-in ballots from the in-person ballots from the provisionals. Some of the counties, when they uploaded the results, it merged the two types into one, and that was just, they formatted it wrong. So we're working through that to make sure that the actual attribution of those ballots are right.
You've noticed that there's a larger than expected number of counties that have reported none.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that they haven't counted. It may just mean that it's just not uploaded to the Department of State website yet. So I do urge you to check the county websites and see if that's available on their website.
Last thing, I'm sorry, if I could just double back on something. If I heard you correctly in your introductory remarks, it was between 2.5 and 3 million mail-in ballots. Is that, and you're roughly 50%? If you could speak with as much specificity as possible regarding that would be helpful.
Well, I think, the numbers that I gave yesterday, it was just under 2.6 million, as I recall. But again, I'm not sure what has additionally come in. But so as of yesterday, at some point, it was just under 2.6 million that had been cast. And that's when I think I said it was 83.
Okay, you have been listening to first the governor there of Pennsylvania, Tom Wolf, and now the Secretary of State, Kathy Brookvar, describe where they are in terms of their counting. It is ongoing. There are many votes left to be counted, more than 1 million, she was just saying. We want to bring in now David Axelrod, Abby Phillip, and election law analyst Rick Pildes. Guys, I know you were just listening to that. Ax, I was just doing a little back of the envelope math. Maybe you can help check mine. So 1 million, that's what I mean, back of the envelope. So 1 million plus votes still to be counted. Trump is ahead of Biden by 543,000. Biden has been getting about 70% of the mail-in ballots. So Biden still has a good chance in Pennsylvania?
Well, yeah, I think everybody recognizes that, and that's why, the Trump campaign has been so active in trying to question some of the ballots and how some of the ballots are being handled, because they know that these numbers may not pencil out for them. And Pennsylvania is very much in play this morning.
Okay, so Rick,
can I just
go ahead,
to add to that, just because what we should really parse carefully what we're hearing from both of the campaigns. What the Trump campaign is saying about Pennsylvania is that they think that out of those outstanding votes, the margins are going to be tighter for Donald Trump. They're not saying necessarily that they think that if things remain the way that they are, they can they can maintain their lead. So they're hoping that the margins narrow. But if they don't, I think you're right, and David's right, that this is why the Biden campaign is more confident that they will pull out in Pennsylvania. It's also why for the Trump campaign, Arizona becomes so critically important. They need it if they're going to lose Pennsylvania to keep their hope alive.
Go ahead,
Allison, let me just respond to something Abby said. They had a press briefing this morning, and they insisted that they will win Arizona and Nevada, and they had to do that because if you concede Arizona and Nevada, which I think will clarify themselves in the next many hours, then Pennsylvania becomes irrelevant. As important as it is with its 20 electoral votes, it becomes irrelevant because it's clear that Michigan and Wisconsin are drifting in the other direction. So I think that they are trying to hold their place and tell everyone this is still doable. And they're insisting on that. We'll see when the cards are turned over in Vegas and elsewhere later today.
In the meantime, Rick, you're already seeing legal challenges cropping up in Pennsylvania?
Yes, there are already at least 3 lawsuits in Pennsylvania. One has gotten a lot of attention because it's been pending for quite a while now, and that's the one that went to the Supreme Court once already, which is this 3-day extension for the receipt deadline for the absentees, which the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ordered. So we are going to have to see how many ballots come in that 3-day window. Could they affect the outcome if the margin is so tight in Pennsylvania? That case is absolutely going back to the Supreme Court if that margin is close enough to possibly make a difference. Now, the court has twice had a chance to stop that extension. It declined to do it both times. It didn't issue a stay. It didn't expedite this case. So voters in Pennsylvania have good reason to believe it's valid for them to have cast those ballots and returned them within that 3-day window after Election Day. But that obviously is a big issue. And the second thing is there have been inconsistencies in how state officials are handling some of these absentee ballots. The Secretary of State has issued unclear guidance, in my view. That opens up further challenges. There are challenges like that in the court. I don't know that they'll affect as many ballots, potentially, as the ballots that come in that 3-day window. But, Pennsylvania, I have to say, Pennsylvania has done an incredibly sloppy job in this election. It's been clear for a long time. It's a massive failure of political leadership in that state on both the Democratic governor's side and the Republican legislature side. And the country is now put in this position where we have 50% of the absentee ballots still to count in Pennsylvania. Now we do have to wait, we have to be patient, but we shouldn't be here in the first place.
So we're just getting a report that the Biden campaign says that Joe Biden will address Americans today. Axe, what do you think he should say?
Well, I mean, I think you're going to hear him talk about where the state of play is, and I'm sure a very strong rebuke of the president for what he did last night. Essentially claiming victory, knowing that these numbers were going to turn, claiming victory and alleging that anything that changes the result would be fraud, and declaring that he wanted to stop the voting, as he said, as if we are in some authoritarian state. So I think that Biden he's probably going to reassure the country that the process is going forward, that we're going to have an answer, and that he expects that answer is going to be him.
Guys, stick around. We're going to need your analysis throughout the day. Really appreciate talking to you. More votes are coming in as we speak. Stand by for CNN's special live coverage.
All eyes on Michigan as Joe Biden moves into the lead, and we wait to hear shortly from election officials in that state. I'm Anderson Cooper. This is Election Day in America Continued. Michigan and Wisconsin. You see Vice President Biden there on the top as these states have been turning bluer all morning. More votes still to be counted. Arizona, Nevada still in flux. But Biden holds the lead in those states, too, right now as well. Georgia, surprisingly close. Aaron Burnett is with us as well. Aaron?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how close it is, Anderson, and here we are. We're going to be digging into all these numbers. Obviously, the votes coming in, as you saying, the shift, the change in count, and talk to the officials in these closest states to try to see when we're going to know.
Yeah, we all need to take a deep breath and wait for the votes to be counted, but there's a lot to discuss in the hours ahead. We have reporters standing by with the two campaigns weighing in on their paths to victory. A lot to bring you. Thanks very much for joining us. It's going to be a long and exciting day. Let's start with our John King and the big picture, drill down maybe on Wisconsin and Michigan as well. Everything has been shifting just throughout this morning. If you went to sleep last night thinking you knew the way this thing was going, you had a surprise this morning. So, John, for those who stayed up late and are just now tuning back in, big picture, where are we? What happened since last night?
Well, the most important point, Anderson, is the point you just made. So before I get to the map, I just want to reinforce it. Patience, patience, patience. Both campaigns are asking for votes to be counted today. The Trump campaign wants them counted in Arizona and Nevada. They have every right to ask that. Joe Biden is leading in those states right now. The Biden campaign says keep counting in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. They have every right to ask that. Everybody should want all the votes counted. Let's start there. If you went to bed around 3 a.m., Wisconsin was red then. Donald Trump was leading. Michigan was red then. Donald Trump was leading. So you see the map now. It does look very different. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tap away here. You see these states going into the gray. The ones are gray. We have not called them yet. We have the leads right now. I'll show you. Remember, we have not called Nevada. We have not called Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Maine, North Carolina, or Georgia. So now I'm going to come back and take that off. You do see who is leading. Leading is not winning. Leading means we're still counting votes. So let's go in. Again, I left here about 4 o'clock in the morning. This was still red. Now it is blue. It is very narrowly blue, which is why we will continue the count. Joe Biden on top in Wisconsin, 49.4 to 48.8, 20,697 votes at the moment. They're continuing the count. They should continue the count. Very close. So as they continue the count, we know what's happening today in all of these states. The lawyers are getting involved, and most of that is fine. You want eyes on everything that's happening. The question is, where does it go from there? Move over to Battleground, Michigan, 9,994 votes. Remember, the president won this state 4 years ago. President Trump won this state by 10,000 votes. So a nail-biter in Michigan seems to be a trademark of the Trump presidency, 49.3, 49.1. About 90% of the votes in, but again, they still have to count votes. One of the places they're still waiting for votes, Wayne County. This is Detroit and the area around Detroit. It's heavily Democratic. You see they're at 70%. So if you're in the Biden campaign, you think, largest county in the state, predominantly Democratic. We think we're going to add votes. But again, let's let the process play out today. Let's bring it out more and come over to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Still red. It was red at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. Still red this morning. 540,000 vote lead. When I left last night, about 4 a.m., it was around 660,000, I think. So it's a little smaller for Donald Trump, 78% in. But the Secretary of State, Pennsylvania, just moments ago saying they still have a lot of votes to count, asking for patience. But she did say she expects progress throughout the day. So let's pull it out and look at the map. I'm going to just walk over here because this is the context that matters. 270 electoral votes to be the next president of the United States, right? Where are we right now? Joe Biden at 224. The president at 213. The changes overnight, this is one of the reasons they matter, and this is why the Trump campaign says, we believe Nevada and Arizona can turn. There's a reason they're saying that. They cannot concede those states because they need them. Let's just do a little math. If Joe Biden keeps his lead here, keeps his lead here, keeps his lead here, keeps his lead here, then you get to 267. 267, and it takes 270. We have not called Maine yet. If Joe Biden can win them all in Maine, 271. Even if he loses Maine's 2nd congressional district to the president, you bring this out, Maine is one of 2 states, like Nebraska, that splits it. Even if he lost the 2nd congressional district, which is quite possible, Joe Biden could win the presidency with Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, 2 out of the 3 in Maine. He wouldn't even need Pennsylvania, North Carolina, or Georgia. That's the reason the Trump campaign says we're not done out here, Anderson. We're going to count throughout the day. Both men have a chance to be the next president of the United States. Patience is going to be required, and we have people watching. The campaigns have people watching. So when you hear, stop, it's a fraud, stop counting, it's just simply wrong. Let's count votes.
And what is the situation in Nevada right now for both candidates?
Right, let me come back over here so we can do that. Sorry for the little choreography issues here, but let's bring this up over here. Nevada, 7,647 votes. So you see in state after state, we have these really close elections, which also means they're going to continue to count the votes here. Clark County, Vegas, this is 72, 73, sometimes higher depending on turnout, but 7 out of 10 votes, more than that coming out of here. And again, they're at 84%, so we're going to have more votes out of Clark County as they count the votes, 53% to 45% if you round it up. Odds are, based on everything we've seen in Clark County so far, Joe Biden will get more votes here. But that's odds are. That's what happened last night. That's what happened overnight. Let's let the people count the votes and see what we get. You bring it out here. You come into the more rural counties and you come through here again. 88%. Not a lot of people live here, but the president will make up some votes in places like this. Make up some votes as we move around the counties here and come over here like this. 88% there. Again, president winning big. You see, it's 1,300 votes, this 800 votes, 750 votes. So he's going to make up some votes. This is why you have to be patient and why states are complicated. Clark County is the biggest. Washoe County is the second biggest. They're up to 89%. This is a close swing county, 51 to 47 if you round it up. So let them count some votes. Biden could pick up a few. Trump could catch up a little bit. This is the thing. This is the issue we're going to go through all day long, Anderson. These state officials are working. Some of them didn't sleep. Some of them are getting, some of these local election officials getting a little bit of sleep. We're going to have to go from East Coast to West Coast, North Carolina, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada. Keep counting. Now, the question is, at the end of the day, some of these states may be close enough for mandatory recounts or candidates can request recounts. So that's part of the issue as well. Patience is the operative word this morning.
Is it fair to say in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Nevada, and in Arizona, the outstanding votes that have not yet been counted, the outstanding tallies, can you say one way or another whether they're in counties that lead more Democratic?
We know some of them are. Pennsylvania is more of an exception because there are several counties, a half dozen or more counties that President Trump carried 4 years ago, where they deliberately said, we're going to be overwhelmed on election day, we're going to wait until today. So those are counties Trump carried and Trump is leading in today. Now, we also know, though, from our data that the overwhelming early vote, mail-in vote in Pennsylvania was Democratic. And so we need to balance that out. You can say, based on the data we have, and based on the vote returns so far, that we expect a lot of those votes still outstanding to be for Joe Biden. But we need to let them count them and not jump ahead. So again, you pull this up right here, 540,000 votes in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That looks like a big lead, right? It looks like a big lead, but not so much if you start thinking, well, we're only up to 60% in Philadelphia County, Philadelphia City and the county around it. If you're only up to 60%, common sense right here. Joe Biden's getting 78% to 21%, if you want to round that up, 22% for President Trump. So as they count these votes, Joe Biden is going to win the bulk of them. Is it enough? We've done the math. There are enough votes out there based on where they're missing, and they're not missing. Missing is the wrong word. This is going to be a confusing day. Where they have yet to be counted. They're not missing. No one's out knocking on doors asking people to hand them ballots. These ballots are all in secure locations. Both campaigns are watching them. So when you hear talk about shenanigans, just everybody needs to walk through the process. But in Philadelphia, then you move over here to Montgomery County. Again, 85%, more votes to be counted. 61 if you round up to 39. Democratic suburbs outside of Philadelphia. So yes, we have done the math, and there is a possibility that Joe Biden, when you look at how many are out, where are they, what do we know about the mail-in voting percentages, yes, Joe Biden has a chance to overcome what looks like a pretty big lead.
John, the Secretary of State, we heard from the Secretary of State in Pennsylvania just a short time ago. She was talking about millions of ballots which have yet to be counted. She said millions with an S. And in particular, she was also talking about ballots coming from members of the armed forces, which there's, I think, a 10-day window for those ballots to still come in.
Right, you're raising a critical question, a critical point. And remember, we'll walk through this all day long. There are different rules in different states. Some states, it says the ballot has to be received by Election Day. Other states says it just has to be postmarked by Election Day. So even if we make progress today, we may not get to the finish line in some of these states, and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is one of them. So the ballots they have in hand, they're going to count today. More ballots could come in that are considered legal ballots. Watch again. We saw the president last night. The president wants to stop the count. That's not what we do in the United States, but we do know that tells us the posture of the president's legal team. They are going to go into these places and say, stop the count. That will be the fight over the next several days. But you raise a very important point. Military members, Americans who live overseas, this happens to them in every election. Every 2 years in federal elections, every time they vote in their state election, they mail in their ballots. As long as they were legally cast and they're postmarked by the right time and they're on the way, they should be counted. So if it's very, very close,
We think we're going to make a lot of progress today. The Secretary of State, you just mentioned her, Secretary of State Bookbar in Pennsylvania, says they're going to make a lot of progress today. But if it gets closer and stays close, our patience may be required for another day or 3, perhaps even longer, more.
Yeah, I mean, the notion of stopping counting ballots, which is what the president had said last night, that would mean that the people who are serving in the armed forces, their ballots wouldn't count. That seems impossible to imagine.
Well, just look, number one, I know there are Trump supporters watching as well. There are Biden supporters watching. We just need to it's impossible. It's impossible. Ask people to take their hats off today. This is the United States of America, and we count votes. That's what we do, right? And listen, there's an inconsistency in the Trump argument, Anderson, if you will, if you pull it out. Trump is saying, stop here, right? I'm winning in Pennsylvania. I'm leading in Pennsylvania. Just stop. They're mad because at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., these were both red. The Trump campaign says, stop. We think it's over. And yet, at the same time, they're arguing we need to keep counting votes and keep looking in Nevada and Arizona. Why? Because they're trailing in those states, and they were trailing consistently, right? This was not a case of these states flipping overnight as they counted more ballots. The president was behind pretty much from the beginning of the count, once we had a credible representation of the ballots. So there's an intellectual inconsistency in the Trump argument. In these states over here, the blue wall states, if you will, please stop, because they were key to my 2016 map. Out here, let's keep counting. But again, there's a reason for that. If you come over here and just look at this, if you go through the math, right, I'm going to bring this back to where we are. If you bring this back to where we are, if Joe Biden wins this, and this, right, I haven't done Maine yet, we're still waiting on North Carolina, then it's absolutely imperative. It's absolutely imperative for the president to go here and here. It still may not be enough, right, even if the president were to get this. He's not going to win all of them in Maine. So these states here, the president needs this math. And then he hopes he can keep this in the end. That would get him moving up as we go. We still have Alaska to add to it. If you do that, when Alaska comes in and you do this, then the President of the United States can win. But there's a possibility that he needs either Nevada or Arizona for his math if the trend lines here continue the way they're going, which is why, again, it's inconsistent. They want you to stop here and keep going there. That tells you everything you need to know. That's politics. That's politics. We need to do the math.
John, talking about doing the math, we won't do that right now. John King, stand by. I want to go to Kate Baldwin in Philadelphia for more on the state of the count there and the speed of it. Kate, what are you learning?
Hey there, Anderson. 50%. That is the mark that Philadelphia has just hit. That is how many of the mail-in ballots that they have been processing nonstop since yesterday. That is how many of the mail-in ballots that they have finally been able to count. The commissioners, they just updated us a short time ago, and they added 45,000 mail-in ballots to the count. As of 4 o'clock this morning, it was around 141,000 mail-in ballots had been counted. They just updated it. Now it's above 186,000 mail-in ballots. They say that there is no issues to report, that the process, it just takes time from beginning of opening the envelope twice, flattening it out, getting it into the processing machine, and then scanning it. And the way the system works, while it might be confusing and frustrating at times, is that the count and the report comes out in waves. And the latest wave was just updated. It is very clear from my conversations, Anderson, with the people that are overseeing this and in charge here in Philadelphia, that they are acutely aware that the country's eyes are on them, and they want to get it right. How long will it take? When will they be done? They are definitely not committing to a timeline publicly, but behind the scenes, I'm told that it is not unreasonable to think that they will be done with the count here in Philadelphia by tomorrow morning, be done with a vast majority of the 350,000 mail-in ballots, definitely the most of any county in the Commonwealth. They think it's not unreasonable. I'm told it's not unreasonable to think they'll be done by tomorrow, Anderson.
So, Kate, just 2 quick points. You said they've counted 150,000. Does that mean, and it's 50%, does that mean there's another 150,000 still to be counted?
Yes. There's 350,000 mail-in ballots here. They still have some more coming in because remember how it works in Pennsylvania. If it's postmarked by Election Day, they have 3 days for them to come in. So the mail-in ballots are still going to be coming in. Those will be segregated and put to a side in the processing, in this massive processing facility that they're doing kind of right behind me. So they have, yes, they've got, if they're at 186 right now, 86,000, they've got just that to go. They think, and the process is moving. They think they'll get it done.
Okay, so let's go, Kate, appreciate it. We'll check in back with you as soon as we get more votes coming in. Let's go back to John King. John, we've seen now, Kate saying 45,000 more votes being counted. Could you take a look at that area in Philadelphia?
Right, so you just pop it out again. So you're in Central City, Philadelphia, right? Always blue and always blue by a lopsided margin. So this is why in the Biden campaign, they say, be patient. They think they have the math to overcome this. They have every right to think that. We went through this in 2016. Remember, late in the night, the Clinton campaign kept telling us they thought Michigan and Wisconsin were going to flip back, that they had the votes. They didn't in the end. But we counted them and we got to the end. And that's what we need to do here. Is the Biden math right? We know from our data about early voting that they are overwhelmingly disproportionate Democratic votes. The early vote, the mail-in votes in Pennsylvania, the entire Commonwealth. So if you're thinking about the city of Philadelphia and the Democratic areas around it, it is reasonable to assume the ballots left in this area are going to be, look how the vote is coming in so far. Again, 78% if you round up, 22% if you round that up. So it's coming in lopsided for Joe Biden. There is no reason to assume that it's going to change, especially because we do know from all of our data, and even the ones they've counted so far, the mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania are disproportionately Democratic. So the math is a possibility. You watch them count them here. Kate mentioned Philadelphia. It's not just Philadelphia, though, because the suburbs around Philadelphia are populous, and they are absolutely essential to the Democrats, and they're missing votes as well. We're up to about 85% in Montgomery County here. I just want to drop down here, Delaware County, 74%. And again, you see the Biden margins in the votes we have counted. So there's no guarantee that those margins continue. It could get bigger. It could shrink. We don't know. That's why you count votes. But common sense tells you, okay, Biden's winning there 59-40. Therefore, as they count more votes, he's going to add. Is he going to add enough? That's why you count them, Anderson. But you just walk around these suburbs. There's Montgomery County. You come to Philadelphia here, and you just look through. In all of these places, you see the blue in southeastern Pennsylvania. That is the foundation of any Democratic win in Pennsylvania. Has to start here. And also last night, the next place you want to look is out here in Allegheny County. They still have more votes to count here as well. Where they need to do the most counting are Democratic areas, which means, yes, Biden has a chance. Let them count the votes.
John, stand by. We have a key race alert. There's a key race alert in Michigan. Let's take a look. More votes have been counted. More votes coming in. Joe Biden has widened his lead somewhat. 32,565 votes ahead of Donald Trump. It is still very close in Michigan, but this is very significant. It had been about 10,000 or so votes, the difference between them. Let's go back to John King. John, Hillary Clinton lost in Michigan, correct me if I'm wrong, by about 10,000 votes. That's what Biden's lead had been up until this moment. He's now extended it to 32,565.
He has, and you look at the map and you see a lot of red in the middle, but you see blue where the Democrats need it to be blue. And the main point is down here. Wayne County is Detroit in the area around it. By far, the largest county in Michigan. 18 to 20% of the vote is going to come right here in this county. And again, they're still counting there. The Biden total has grown. He passed President Trump overnight and took the lead. It's not a win. He's leading, but 76% in Wayne County. So again, a quarter of the vote still to count in a place that we know is coming in lopsided for the Democrats, 67% to 32% if you round up there. And so you see Joe Biden's vote total there, 489,000 plus. I just want to go back and look. 4 years ago, the Clinton campaign was disappointed in Wayne County. They wanted more raw votes, if you will. But you see she had 519,000 and 67% of the vote. The president was just at 30% of the vote. We know just about everywhere turnout is up this year. So if you see that at 519,000, then you come here. Joe Biden's at 489,000. Just logic tells you. The math has to prove it. And again, this is why patience is required. But logic tells you, common sense tells you, they have ballots to count. They're only at 76%. That Joe Biden is going to stretch that. And if he sticks anywhere close to that percentage, that means he's adding some pretty serious math as they count those votes. So the fact that his lead is widening and they still have votes to count in Wayne County is an encouraging sign for the Biden campaign. Doesn't get you the finish line, but it's encouraging. So you look at some other places, you come over here, and you're just going through, now you're going through, right? The larger counties, the Democratic counties, 82% in Kalamazoo. It's closer here. It's about a 10-point gap if you look at it. So you count the votes. Maybe Joe Biden adds more to his lead right now. Maybe the president comes back. That's what we just have to be patient and walk through. And you see all this red in Michigan. One of the challenges is to check in on the smaller places, right, where we know the president runs it up. It's not a lot of math, but every county counts as you add it up. And you see here, Clare County, they're at 95%. So one of the challenges now when you get close to the end is trying to, where else might there be votes? And is there enough? If you know Wayne County has a ton of votes to count, and that's predominantly Democratic, are there places where the president can counter that, make up that math? A little bit here, but you see 95% is in. You move here, 96% is in. You move here, 99% is in. So that's why if you're in the Biden campaign, these smaller rural counties that go Republican, most of the votes are in. Again, we'll watch and count, and the morning after, sometimes you'll see a county official raise their hand and say, we have some absentee ballots. There's nothing wrong with that. They were overwhelmed yesterday. So we'll watch as the process plays out. Just looking at some other places here, you see in Oakland County, the suburbs north of Detroit, a critical area, used to be a swing area, trending more and more Democratic. They're at 95%. So they're just about done there. As they continue to count the votes, it's possible Joe Biden adds a few more. It's possible, there are Republicans in those suburbs. They can pull in votes. Let's look at Macomb County here. This is a key battleground in the state, blue-collar workers. You come north of Detroit into Macomb County, and you have 53 to 45, 254,000 votes. Here's one of the things I'm looking at throughout the day. Turnout was up in this election. So that's where the president is now, 254. If you go back 4 years ago, he was at 224. So you see evidence there of the higher turnout. Hillary Clinton at 176,000 and change. You come in here, Joe Biden has already passed that. So one of the things you're looking at is, do we have vote counts already that are higher than 2016? In places where you don't, there are a lot more votes likely to be counted. Here, you're up to 95%. So if you're the president, this is a place you're winning by 8 points. If you do that there, you might add some votes, but they're at 95%. Right? So if you're going to add votes, it won't be a ton. And if it's early votes, it might actually break for Joe Biden. So this is where you're looking. By the end of the day, Wayne County's at 76% right now. Where is Wayne County, Detroit, as we get later into today? If they can move their math, move their count, if you will, closer to the finish line, then we will have a much better sense of whether that lead, 32,000 and change, whether it stands. But you make a good point. 32,000 now, 10,704 for the president 4 years ago. If you're Joe Biden, you like these numbers, but you got to wait the day out.
And just finally, Kent County in Michigan, which is where Grand Rapids is a Democratic area. And I know earlier there had been, I think it was in the 70%, more votes still needed to come in. What does it look like right now?
We're up to 83%, which means you have to go. And this is a tight one. This is one the president carried 4 years ago. The Democrats really want, this is one of the suburban battles, Grand Rapids and the suburbs around it, out in western Michigan. You see 51 to 47 if you round Joe Biden up. And so 153,000 votes for the president right now. If you go back in time, again, he won this, but he was below 50 because of the third-party candidates, 48 to 45 4 years ago. So it's another place, again, because it's larger, right? This is the fourth largest county in Michigan. So everywhere is counting what's left. Every single county, all across America for that matter, not just in these battleground states, are counting what they didn't get to yesterday. And they're counting what's coming in as long as those are legal. If you're in a state where it can be postmarked and arrive today, if that's legal, then you count them when they come. But the place we look for, the places we spend most of our time on, are places where you're going to find more votes, the larger, more populated counties, and here they're at 83%. So, that means there's more to be counted there, and the president is leading there, so we want to watch and see. Doesn't mean those are votes for President Trump, doesn't mean he'll add to his math, but there are still votes to be counted there. But again, the disproportionate amount that we're waiting for right now come from here, which is always the biggest basket of votes for Democrats. The question is, how many are left, and how fast will they count them?
Yeah, wow. What a day we have ahead of us. We're we're waiting to hear from Michigan Secretary of State, expected any minute, as our live election coverage continues. We'll be right back. With the electoral map trending somewhat bluer at this hour than it was just a few hours ago, we're waiting to hear from Michigan's Secretary of State any moment as Joe Biden stretches his lead in Michigan. We'll go there live when that happens. He had only about a 10,000 vote lead. His lead is now about 35,000 votes or so. The president and his campaign advisors have just been weighing in on the race and their strategy going forward. The Biden team is also making news, so let's check in with both. CNN Jessica Dean is at Biden headquarters in Wilmington, Delaware. CNN John Harwood reporting on the president. John Harwood, let's start with you. What are we hearing from the White House today?
Well, what we're hearing, Anderson, is a reiteration of the strategy that the president has been signaling all year long. And the strategy is to try to subvert the process, the democratic process of vote counting, because he knows that more Americans are against him than are for him. He's been saying so all year, saying he could only lose in a fraudulent election. Last night, he tried it in the middle of the night. He came out and said, well, I'm leading in all these states. I've won the election. Stop the vote counting. Then this morning, he has noted that vote counts overnight in places like Michigan and Wisconsin, he says, have magically disappeared his lead. And he's blaming or suggesting that there's fraud in that vote counting. He had not won those states last
John,
night.
we got to step in. I'm sorry, we'll come back to you. The Michigan Secretary of State is speaking. Let's go to listen.
Ballots effectively, methodically, and securely. Now, this meticulous process is all about and focused on ensuring every absentee ballot is counted accurately and fairly. We have many secure protocols in place to confirm the validity of every ballot. And in fact, that's why the process takes so much time. Our goal is to ensure, again, we're being transparent, but also fully accurate, and that the public, you all, can trust the results of the results as an accurate reflection of the will of the people. Now, importantly, as we go through this counting, as the counting is completed, boards at the county and state levels that are also comprised of people from both parties will then review the procedures and counts of the entire elections before the results are certified as official. So that's the process we're in right now, the beginning of that first tabulation. And when we have that first unofficial tabulation, which we hope will come sometime within the next 24 hours, we will then begin the process of finalizing and with additional secure protocols, moving towards an official tabulation, which could take even more time. Now, notably, you may be thinking, why are we still waiting to hear from Michigan and why are they still counting our ballots? Well, for about 18 months, the election clerks throughout the state of Michigan and I called on our state legislature to update our laws to provide time for pre-processing of ballots that were on par with many other states, like our neighbors in Ohio, who were able to count the vast majority of their ballots yesterday. Now, our state legislature chose not to make that change to our laws, and here we are in Michigan, where our counting process is continuing long after the polls have closed. But rest assured, we're focused on counting every single ballot. That's our focus. Every single valid ballot in Michigan will be counted. And importantly, also right now, there are tens of thousands of ballots that still need to be counted. And jurisdictions have been reporting throughout the morning, as many of you know and have been following. But the information I have is that ballots are still being counted in our largest jurisdictions, including Detroit, Grand Rapids, Flint, Kalamazoo, and numerous other Michigan cities and townships. Now, these ballots were cast by tens of thousands of Michigan citizens who have the right to have their vote counted. And we're going to make sure that right is protected. We're going to ensure that the results of our elections accurately reflect every single valid vote that was cast. And this is particularly important in close races, as the numbers of outstanding ballots are still greater than the margin of difference between many races with leading candidates. So at this point, I ask for patience out of respect to the will of our voters and the work of our election workers who are volunteering in communities all across the state to serve the public and are committed to ensuring an accurate count. Now, I continue to expect, though I had for weeks said we expect results to be in by Friday. We're still certainly on track for that. But as I've also mentioned recently, we are on track to have our results in much sooner. I'll continue to expect that we'll have more information throughout the day. And as I mentioned last night, I'm optimistic, but that by the end of the day, the majority of our ballots will be tabulated and will be much closer to having a full, if not a full and complete unofficial result to announce at that point. But I also want to mention that yesterday in our election,
Joycelyn Benson, the Secretary of State in Michigan. Obviously, it is just too close to call at this point in Michigan. Right now, Joe Biden has about a 32,000 vote lead in Michigan. More numbers had come in just a short time ago, and his lead increased from the 10,000 or so that it was to 32,000. The Secretary of State, really the headlines, 31,000, I should say. The headline really from the Secretary of State is she says that there are still tens of thousands of votes to be counted. They hope by the end of today to have kind of an unofficial vote tally. It'll be tomorrow or even Friday before they can firmly say and officially say what the results in Michigan. She says she hopes it will be before Friday. We're getting new Michigan results right now. Let's put them up. Let's take a look, and let's see. Let me take a look at these. Michigan results. Joe Biden's lead dropping somewhat. He's now just 29,525 votes ahead. It had been 32,000, then 31,000, so a slight downward move for Joe Biden. His lead still 29,525. We were looking at Michigan just moments ago with John King at the Magic Wall, really looking at Wayne County, which is the Detroit area. A lot of votes, it seems, that there. I think it was in the 70. Let's go to John King right now. So, John, you see the few votes gained for President Trump. Where are the votes remaining?
And so, again, what you see there, Joe Biden's lead narrowing a little bit. It's just why we're going to ask people throughout the day to have some patience, whether you're a Biden supporter, whether you're a Trump supporter, whether you're the three people left in America who are neutral about this. I think it's important that we just have patience, because we're seeing the numbers move. As you mentioned, Joe Biden right now, 29,525. It was a little above that just a short time ago. The last time we spoke, it was above 30,000. So what are they doing? Why is that changing? It's changing because they're counting votes. And you just heard the Secretary of State there say she hopes to get this done by Friday. That's unnerving to a lot of people out there, and I understand that. That can be frustrating. It's a very close race. You want to know the winner. Her point is, the legislature in Michigan would not change the law to allow them to start processing these ballots sooner, so they're at it today, and it could go into tomorrow. What did she say? She said in many of Michigan's larger jurisdictions, that's where you have more ballots still to count. The largest of the jurisdictions is Wayne County, predominantly Democratic. That's Detroit and the area around Detroit. Again, this is where Democrats need to run it up to win statewide in Michigan. In the votes counted so far, Joe Biden is doing just that, 67% to 32% if you round it up. But you see there, 76% of the estimated vote in, which means they have about a quarter of it left to count. Now, again, common sense, history, our own polling and data from the early vote tells us Joe Biden's going to add to his total here in Wayne County. That doesn't mean there aren't places for the president to pick up votes. It just means if you look at the Biden lead now, 34,000, it is likely to grow from Wayne County. So where can the president offset that? Well, we talked a little bit earlier. Kent County, maybe the president is leading in Kent County. This is Grand Rapids and the suburbs around it, more conservative. You get to Western Michigan. Right now, Joe Biden's in the hunt here, 51 to 47 if you round that up. But we'll count the rest of the votes, right? We'll just count and see what happens. There are more votes here in Grand Rapids, as the secretary said. And then you go through Kalamazoo, again, another urban area where you have more votes, more people live here. This is the 9th largest of 83 counties in the state of Michigan. Joe Biden's ahead here, 54 to 44,
John,
so 10 points if you round it up. Sure.
We also just got more votes in Michigan. Now Biden's lead has actually grown, 64,769 votes ahead. So this is going to be happening all day long.
Right. You have all these counties counting votes, and they're posting them on their websites, and then they're reporting to the state. Sometimes, and we saw this in Pennsylvania, again, this is where this will be frustrating because people will see a county may post votes before the Secretary of State has them. In some cases, the state may post votes before the county officials get around to putting them on their local website. So there will be some mixed messaging during the day. The key point is the end of the day, right? The key point is the end of the day. You heard Secretary Bookvar in Pennsylvania, Secretary Benson in Michigan will do the same thing. They're going to count the votes, and she's going to check in, whether it's a small county like this, 99% here. She's going to be checking in, getting the reports from all these people to see, are there any more votes to be counted here? And then you move up through these counties here. Genesee County, this is where Flint is in Michigan. Flint, Michigan, they're at 95% right now. So they're almost done. They're almost done. You see, this is closer than I think the Democrats would like it to be, 50.4 to 48 if you round the president up. Go back 4 years ago, this was 50. There's a 10-point, just shy, 9-point race there. So right now, if you're thinking the Democrats think Flint, we need these votes here, that's closer than they would want it to be, but they're going to continue to count votes. Now, again, all the data tells us before the election that the mail-in votes, that most of what we think is yet to be counted, those mail-in votes were disproportionately Democrat. That's what the data told us before the election. Guess what? We're in the election now. We're counting the votes. So we could even set that aside. We know common sense, we know logic, but the most important thing in the next few days, I'm going to just check some of these counties. This is Oakland, 95%. You come back up here, Genesee at 95%. You see the red counties? Are there votes for the president again? 95% here. You come over here, 95% here. These are much smaller counties, but every vote counts, Anderson, and that's the key point.
So
34,769 right now. It's going to seesaw, bounce up and down a little bit. We just keep counting.
So is it really Wayne County in Michigan that has the most votes outstanding?
Yes. And again, exact numbers we need to get from Wayne County officials, but you see they're at 76% right now. If you have a pen and paper at home, you can do this math yourself. So you're at 76%. Joe Biden's leading 67 to 32 when you round up. He has 489,000 and change votes. Well, you got 25% of the vote roughly still to be counted there. If it keeps coming in at these percentages, there's no guarantee of that. Some Democrats think it'll actually come in higher, that the mail-in ballots are so disproportionately Democratic that this could go up. We don't know that. That's what the Biden campaign will tell you. That's why they say they're optimistic there. We just need to wait and count the votes. And there's going to be a lot of political spin today. There's going to be a lot of shall I say, Tarzan moments with people saying, stop this vote or do this more. This is why just let these people do their jobs and count the votes.
You're talking about well over 100,000 votes there. I mean, my math is not very good, but if given the vote, I mean, there's 700,000 or so votes already cast. If 25% of them have yet to be tallied, it's more than 150,000.
Right. And that's exactly why. Because Wayne County is blue. It's always been blue. That's exactly why the Biden campaign thinks it is going to add to its totals, because you have 25% of the votes, 24%, somewhere in that ballpark to be counted in a place where Joe Biden is getting 67% of the vote. He's going to get a majority of those votes in Wayne County. That's just history tells us that. We're not making that up. History tells us that. And 4 years ago, again, this was a source of disappointment late on a Tuesday night. We got into this early Wednesday morning. I remember the Clinton campaign saying, don't call Michigan because we're going to pull more votes out of Wayne County. So we should be skeptical of what any campaign tells us, right? We should be skeptical of what the Biden campaign says today. We should be skeptical about the Trump campaigns today. We should just use the facts, right? We know 4 years ago, Hillary Clinton did not pull it out. She got 519,444 votes in Wayne County. We know right now, Joe Biden is under. This is why it's important to count. It's a higher turnout election, right? We'll see in the end if there's higher turnout in Wayne County. But look, Joe Biden, shy of 490,000 votes, right? Hillary Clinton 4 years ago, 520,000 votes. I'm rounding up a little bit, but 519,000 and change then, 489,000. It just tells you, because we know the turnout was up in this election, there are votes out there to be counted. And this is a disproportionately Democratic place. Biden campaign has every reason to believe they're going to get more. But guess what? The way we know whether that's true is to give them the time to count it. You can be frustrated about it. We all wish this would happen more quickly, but it isn't. And the other point is, again, when you hear late votes, how are they doing this? Where are these votes coming from? These votes, whether it's in Wayne County here, Democratic, or a little tiny Republican county here, Lake County, these votes are in-house. Democratic eyes watching them, Republican eyes watching them, local election officials watching them. In some places, they have cameras. I know they have that in Philadelphia watching them. So when you hear things about, are they sneaking in new ballots? That just doesn't happen. If anyone tries to do it, somebody will see them. We just need to be patient and let them count the votes.
If anybody's playing a drinking game, nobody should play drinking. Nobody should play a drinking game on count the votes. That's going to be that and patience are the words we're going to hear an awful lot of today. Hey, Georgia's Secretary of State has been briefing reporters. He says 200,000 absentee ballots have yet to be counted, and 40 to 50,000 early votes remain outstanding. They say that they hope to have them counted by this afternoon. How significant would that be?
It's significant in the sense that you just mentioned, 240,000, if I got your math quickly, roughly ballpark number there. The president's lead in Georgia is 101,837 votes, 50.5 to 48.3, so 51 to 48 if you want to round the president up. Again, for Joe Biden to make that up with like 240,000 votes, if that's the right universe of votes, that's a pretty enormous hill to climb. But the question is, where are those votes, right? So you're looking at this map. If the Democrats are going to mount to come back in Georgia, it's going to be here, and a little bit of help from here. But Atlanta and the suburbs around it are the key. So let's just go in and take a look. And again, you got to find out exactly where are these votes. But if you go in Fulton County, for example, I left at 4 in the morning. They weren't anywhere near 95%. They are now. And you see it, this is Atlanta, and the suburbs around Atlanta, overwhelmingly Democratic. Joe Biden's getting 72% of the vote there. But this says they're 95% in, right? It's a larger population center, so that 5% can be a lot of votes. We'll let them count them and see if it happens here. This is the one I was looking at a little bit earlier, and it's still at 80%. DeKalb County, you come to the east of Atlanta, very important suburban area for the Democrats, the suburbs trending their way. If you don't believe me, 83% to 16% there, and 80% here. So there are a lot of votes here to be counted. Logic tells you, looking at the results of the votes we have so far, Joe Biden is going to add to his math here. Is there enough, Anderson, to overcome 101,000? That's why we're going to wait the day out, right? We're going to wait the day out. You can do the math at home. The probability of that, the hill is pretty steep, but because if they're missing from these areas here, Fulton County missing 5%, Cobb County missing 11%. You see, this is a little closer, but Joe Biden has the lead there. If you walk through these counties, 95% here, I went through that already. Gwinnett County at 95%. You come back down here, this 80% in DeKalb is the one that tells me, watch that. Watch the next wave of votes that come in from there. Does Joe Biden narrow the lead when more of this comes in? If so, then you're putting in play. If not, what is the harm? Even if the president keeps his lead, what is the harm of counting all the votes and knowing that with more certainty as we walk through the delicate hours ahead of us?
You know, John, just for viewers who are not following this as closely, the president has said in a tweet that, late at night, there were suddenly magically all these votes appeared that changed to a Biden lead in a number of states. There's nothing magical or nefarious about it. It's simply votes being counted.
It is simply votes being counted. Imagine you come home from work, you have a stack of bills on your desk at home, you're tired. You want to do them all? You don't get to them all. You do some, you go to bed, you get up in the morning, and you do the rest. It's the same stack. It was sitting right there on the desk. You just didn't get to it all because you were tired and you had to go to bed, or you didn't have enough help, so you went to bed. This is happening here. This happens in every election. Let's go back to 2018, right? The Democrats had a big night on the midterm election night. We didn't realize how big for days, Anderson, for days. In California, some other closely contested House races, they kept counting legally cast ballots. That's the key point. Legally cast ballots. Each state has its rules. And again, both campaigns have every right to send in lawyers to watch. That's fine. That is perfectly within the rules and within the system to say, how are you handling that ballot? Can I look at that ballot? Can I check, was that one processed right? Can I look at the postmark? All that is perfectly legal. It happens every election, and both campaigns have every right to do it. That's why we have rules, and you have appeals, and the process. Let it play out. Let it play out. There are eyeballs on these ballots. They have been collected. Some will come in today. Some will come in today in states that allow ballots to come in today, as long as they're postmarked, and there are some states that do that. That's perfectly legal too. This happens every year we have an election. I was going to say every 4 years we have a presidential election. Every 2 years we have the midterm elections. Some states have elections in the middle of those for state and local offices as well. They know what they're doing. They know how to do this. If there are issues, there will be eyeballs on them and people can complain. To blanketly say they're sneaking in ballots, they're cheating, and they're stealing is simply false.
Much more ahead. Next, how Biden's campaign is feeling with the count in Michigan moving by the minute. Be right back. Right now, with numbers moving in Joe Biden's direction in Michigan and Wisconsin, perhaps even Georgia, the question is, what must be the thinking at Biden headquarters? Jessica Dean is in Wilmington, Delaware for us. Also, John Harwood is covering the White House. Jessica Dean, let's start with you. What are you hearing from the Biden campaign?
Well, just about a little over an hour ago, Anderson, they held a briefing, Biden's campaign manager saying that they believe they have a clear path to victory. They're very optimistic. A senior advisor telling CNN they believe they will win today. Let me walk you through a little bit why they're saying this. They believe they're going to win Wisconsin. In Michigan, they also believe they're going to win there. They're very optimistic about the vote by mail numbers there. In Pennsylvania, they believe they're going to win Pennsylvania. As John has been showing us, the vote by mail in Philadelphia, they have their eye on there. Georgia, they're also watching Fulton County. They're realistic, though, about North Carolina, acknowledging that President Trump is up there right now. But overall, like we've all been saying all morning, they are asking for patience, but they are incredibly optimistic. They believe that when all these votes are counted, that Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States. And Anderson, we're also learning that Joe Biden is expected to address the nation at some point today. We're still waiting to hear on when that might be and exactly what his message might be. They also, the campaign, of course, watching these numbers, watching which states might be called in the coming hours as well, and will adjust as need be.
Have they talked at all about legal challenges? Clearly, the president is set on doing all he can.
Right, and they at one point on the briefing, one of their senior advisors and lawyer Bob Bauer was saying, you know, that President Trump had threatened to send lawyers to the Supreme Court, but that has not happened, and that if it did indeed happen, he would be in for a very large defeat in the courts. The Biden campaign really believing that the law is certainly on their side here, and that they are going to win this just outright.
All right, Jessica Dean, the Biden campaign. Let's go to John Harwood, standing by in Washington, D.C. John, what are we hearing from the president?
Well, Anderson, we heard from the president the tweet that you mentioned with John King, where he claimed that his lead had magically disappeared in Democratic-run states with secret vote dumps and that sort of thing. Twitter flagged that as misleading for the reason that you were discussing with John King. It's not magic. They're not secret vote dumps. They're simply counting the votes. The problem for the president is last night he signaled a strategy of trying to stop vote counting. But now that Joe Biden has taken the lead in both Wisconsin and Michigan, Joe Biden is leading in states with 270 electoral votes. It's not a tenable strategy to try to stop vote counting across the board if your opponent's got enough electoral votes to win. So what the Trump campaign is doing, they outlined on a conference call today, is a cherry-picking selective strategy of saying, well, the math works for us if we only count legally cast votes. So what they're going to try to do is keep counting in places where they're behind to try to make up the deficit. But in places like Philadelphia, where Joe Biden is making up ground, try to disqualify votes that would advantage him. The problem is, as we've seen from the 2000 legal battle between Bush and Gore, if you have the lead, that's an advantageous position. And if you're trying to have additional vote counts, it is disadvantageous to try to say, well, I want vote counting stopped here, but not there. Remember, the Supreme Court threw out the Florida vote count on the grounds that it was being done in different counties in different ways, and that violated equal protection for voters. That's the same challenge that the Trump campaign is going to face if they say, well, let's keep counting in Nevada and Arizona, but stop the count in Pennsylvania as these mail-in ballots, which we all anticipated would favor Joe Biden, start coming in. And it's also worth noting, finally, Anderson, that the reason these votes are getting counted slowly is that Republican state legislatures, with the acquiescence of the support of the Trump campaign, prevented those states from processing and counting them earlier for precisely this reason, because they were hoping to stop a late vote count and a late surge of votes to Joe Biden, which is exactly what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, John Harwood, appreciate it. Let's go for more to our Aaron Burnett. Aaron?
All right, Anderson. So let's ask David Challing how to interpret all of this. I mean, David, you hear John Harwood, right? A lot of confidence from the Trump campaign, right? They say when you count these mail-in ballots, it's going to break in our favor. That's what the Trump campaign is saying. But when you take a place like Michigan, right, and we now have a margin as these votes come in of more than triple the margin of Trump's victory victory in 2016, but this time for Joe Biden. The ballots outstanding seem to be around Detroit. Is the confidence that the Trump campaign has right now really rooted in reality?
Well, listen, we're going to count the votes, of course, and see. But to your point about Michigan, not just are we waiting for more absentees from Detroit, so we are also waiting from Grand Rapids. The city of Grand Rapids is the population center inside of Kent County. John was showing that on the wall a little bit ago. And there are some 60,000 absentee ballots to be counted in Grand Rapids. We expect them to overwhelmingly favor Joe Biden there. It may add to his total. We don't know how many of those 60,000 have already been counted and are included in that count. But yes, a 35,000 vote lead. This is why what Jessica Dean was just saying has the Biden campaign feeling very good that that lead in Michigan is insurmountable for Donald Trump. Now, Aaron, I think what Bill Stepien, the campaign manager on the Trump side, said about Wisconsin was really interesting because he said it's a razor thin margin and it is recount territory, perhaps. It is true that if there's a margin of less than 1%, the losing candidate can indeed request a recount, but not until the official canvass is done. I think the counties have until about November 17th to get that all in. And on the 17th of November, the state puts out that official canvass. And then the losing candidate, if the margin is within 1%, as it is now, has the right to request a recount. I'm not sure if Stepien was indicating that is going to be their strategy, but it doesn't necessarily mean that 20,000 vote lead is going to change all that much. That is about how much Donald Trump won the state by 4 years ago, Aaron.
That's right, exactly. And by the way, I just want to make sure we update the numbers here for Michigan because these are just they're just going to be dripping in throughout the day. We're now up to 35,551 in terms of as of the very latest, with the votes still to come in, but that's the latest margin in favor currently of Joe Biden in the state of Michigan. So as these counts come in, David, how do you interpret, because you're talking about, okay, you can request a recount, you can be within the legal margin. You're referring specifically to Michigan.
No, that was Wisconsin.
To Wisconsin, where the margin last time around was what, 0.8%, right? So you're in that realm. That doesn't mean it's going to change the count. But they're now saying, Bill Stepien, the campaign manager for President Trump, says, if we count all legal ballots, we will win, right? Trying to sow doubt in the legality of ballots, which all of these are legally cast ballots according to the laws of these states.
Right. I think what they're indicating there is they're going to try and define in court arguments what a legal ballot is and fight for their definition of what a legal ballot is. And that's where the court action will come as these, again, we're actually not in overtime yet. I just want to be clear. We're kind of in the fourth quarter of this game in terms of vote count. So that will come once these canvasses are done, if there are official contests or legal action there. I will note one other state that Stepien mentioned was Nevada. That was a state Hillary Clinton won. It is pretty close in the count right now. What is giving the Biden campaign confidence there, and again, each side is going to express confidence, and it will sometimes be hard to separate out the confidence and the spin from the data, but we do have votes to look at and we do have information. And in Nevada, what is giving the Trump campaign some hope is that I think we're up to like 86% of the estimated vote is in Nevada, that there's a greater percentage of outstanding vote. But here's the problem. So much of that outstanding vote is in Clark County, Las Vegas, or in Washoe. And it's the early vote. So not only is the outstanding vote absentee vote, which has been trending to Joe Biden, but also it's in Democratic heavy areas in the state. So I'm not sure that the confidence on the Trump campaign about Nevada is warranted, but there is still much more counting to go, which keeps them hopeful to stay in the game there.
All right, as we count and count and count, Anderson, minute by minute, these tallies changing.
Yeah, and it's going to be a long day. We're just at the top of the hour. The Biden campaign moments ago saying they're on a clear path to victory this afternoon. They're looking at the vote counts out of Michigan and Wisconsin. Our Jessica Dean says the mood at Biden headquarters is optimistic, but the counting is certainly not over. Won't be for certainly today, maybe tomorrow, and till Friday. Who knows? We have breaking news on outstanding ballots right now in Michigan. CNN Sarah Seidner has the breaking news. Sarah.
Yeah, hey, Anderson. Yeah, the Michigan Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, told reporters just moments ago that they have just over 100,000 ballots that are still outstanding, that still need to be counted. But she says she's optimistic that the majority of those ballots will be tabulated by the end of today, saying that, look, she thinks that, by day's end, she'll have those tallied. It will be the unofficial count, of course, but she'll have a very good idea of who took this state. Joe Biden has been up about 30,000 or so points as they've gotten to this point, which is just over 100,000 ballots to be left. Now, we're in Wayne County. That's the most populous county. This is Detroit. And behind me, what you're seeing is the count going on. It has been going on for hours like everywhere else. People are on pins and needles wondering who is going to take this state. We should remember, too, that this is a historic vote here because there are more voters that came out this year than any other time in the history of the state. 5.1 or more than 5.1 million people came out to vote, cast their ballots. And we should mention that the last time they hit a record was 2008. That was when Barack Obama won. And that was about 60,000 votes less than what people have cast now. So an incredible number of people have come out to vote, and they are counting every single one. I will tell you this, what we've been seeing throughout the day, we will see people lifting up red flags anytime that they have any kind of discrepancy, any kind of issue they see with a ballot, and then a supervisor comes over and checks it. It is meticulous the way that they are going through each of these ballots, and if there is any problem, trust me, someone will find it, because they also have dozens of challengers here, both from the Republican side of things and the Democratic side of things, who are walking around. Anyone that you see sort of walking around, many of those are challengers looking at each and every vote. And if there's a problem, they swarm the table sometimes to see what is going on, to make sure that every vote is counted.
It's a really important point you make, given what we anticipate, obviously, from the Trump campaign. What sort of things does warrants a red flag from somebody? Is it signature discrepancy? Is it something wrong with the ballot, multiple marks on the ballot? What is it?
I can literally tell you what I just heard. I was listening as someone had raised a red flag to say, hey, we have an issue. There was someone counting a ballot. They noticed that a name appeared to be on the ballot twice with two different addresses. And so they were concerned that that person may have voted twice. And so they've taken that ballot, and to ensure that there could be someone, obviously, with the same name, first and last name. And so they were looking to make sure that that person did not vote twice. It is things like that. They are looking at every single detail, and I think it should be made very clear that there is, if you look around this room and you see the number of people who are watching this, this is a free and fair election. There have been no major problems, according to the Secretary of State. And so, there are people that are painstakingly spending their time going through every single vote, and any problem that arises, trust me, you would hear about it from one of the challengers, whether it be a Democratic challenger or a Republican challenger. You will certainly hear about it. And, it may end up in the courts if there is a huge challenge at some point in the day. But so far, things going very smoothly here, Anderson.
All right, Sarah Seidner, appreciate that. I want to go back to John King, who's also standing by at the Magic Wall. So, John, given what we just learned from Sarah, about 100,000 votes in Michigan still outstanding, where do we stand in that state in terms of this race?
So let me do this backwards and explain first why today matters so much, and then I'll drill down on some of the states. First, though, I just want to stop again where we just saw from Sarah Seidner, standing in a room, watching Americans count votes, okay, transparently. You heard her talking about the flags. This is how it works. The president and the truth have a very casual relationship. We know that from the past 4+ years. When he talks about this, that is not how it works. This is my 9th presidential election. I've covered all the races for governor, everything else in between. That's exactly how it works. There are eyeballs in there. If Republicans see something they don't like, they will ask a question. If Democrats see something, they will ask something. Anderson, I'm told I have to go back to you.
Yeah, stand by. We have a major projection. We are projecting the state of Maine, going for Joe Biden. Let's take a look at this. Joe Biden is the winner in the state of Maine, getting 3 out of the 4 electoral votes in the state. Joe Biden, 76,648 votes ahead, 54.2% to 42.6%. a pickup for Joe Biden in the race to 270. John?
So, Anderson, I was just going to say, I wanted to go backwards, if you will, drill down on the states first. The main count you just gave us, that projection, makes it all the more reason to do so. So look at our map right now. This is where we stand. Joe Biden at 224, 223 for Donald Trump. Let's do the math. Let's do the addition you just gave me. The state of Maine. Let's bring it up right here. I gave most of it. I'm going to take one away now, right? Maine does this by congressional district. You just gave Joe Biden 3. Let's assume that Donald Trump carries Maine's 2nd congressional district. We're still counting some votes there, but Joe Biden's going to get 3, get some. Let's assume Donald Trump gets that. That would get Joe Biden to 227. This is why today matters so much. Let's walk through this with me, okay? Please be patient. We haven't called Alaska yet. We expect that to go to the president. That would get him up to 217. North Carolina, we haven't called that yet. Georgia, we haven't called that yet. They're still counting votes, but the president has a lead right now. Democrats want to count those votes. I get this completely. Hypothetical exercise. If this stays red, that gets the president to 248, right? So this is why today is so critical in what you're hearing. That has the president within striking distance. But, now the but. Joe Biden leading in Nevada. Joe Biden leading in Arizona. We're not done with those states yet, but that gets you to 248 to 244. Leading in Wisconsin, leading in Michigan. If that holds up, game over. Even without the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That is why today is so important, because we expect progress here. Joe Biden leads in both Michigan and Wisconsin as those vote counts continue. And if the vote counts in Arizona and Nevada continue to have Biden leading, he could be, by the end of the day, it won't be certified. There will be lawyers involved. There will be people asking, but Joe Biden can get to 270. And even if the president held on to the lead he has right now in Pennsylvania, that would get you 270 to 268. 270 gives you the presidency of the United States. That is razor thin. That is why today matters, Anderson. Go ahead.
And it matters. What's so interesting about that, without needing Pennsylvania, we heard from the Secretary of State, could take till Friday to get a final count. There's even ballots coming in from service members overseas and Americans living overseas that may take longer. If you don't need Pennsylvania, if the Biden campaign doesn't need Pennsylvania, we could have a result by the end of today, by tomorrow.
We could have solid numbers if they're very close. Remember what David Chalian said earlier. We will know the math. That doesn't mean the state has certified them. In some states, there's automatic recount. In other states, within a certain percentage, the losing candidate, the trailing candidate, has the right to ask for a recount. Given what we heard from the president last night and what we've heard from his campaign team today, we have every reason to believe that these results will be challenged, or that any legal right, and it is their legal right. If Wisconsin's razor thin and you're within the recount margin, that is their right. And if you're a Biden supporter, you need to respect that right. It'd be nice if the president would also respect the counting of votes. Everybody needs to respect the laws and the rules. But this is why today, I just want to drill down on this. It's so important. If that lead holds up in Michigan and that lead holds up in Wisconsin and the leads in Arizona and Nevada hold up, what you just told us about Maine could get Joe Biden to the finish line. Now, the Biden campaign believes over time that Pennsylvania is going to flip his way over time. Just think about the period we could be going into, though, even if we keep this one uncertain. All right, let's just leave Pennsylvania as a toss-up. By the end of the day, the Biden campaign could well say, we think we have 270 electoral votes. The Trump campaign says no, and we enter into this uncertain period where the results are not certified. The math is the math. We see it with our eyes. We're watching people count votes, but they're not certified. So that's why we'll go through the rest of the day. And I'm just going to come over here very quickly just to check in. Sarah Seidner was just here. And again, I hope our viewers, no matter who you support, remember what you just saw. Transparency. Honest, hardworking people counting votes, raising a red flag if somebody sees something that's a little odd. She said somebody thought it was the same name. So they have two names, then they check the voter rolls, they go back to the precinct, they sort this out. That's also what we do every time in elections.
It's why I followed up with her, because I think it's so fascinating, the level of eyes on each ballot. There are poll watchers there who from both supporters of President Trump, supporters of Vice President Biden, and their voices are also heard in this process.
They are. And again, look, I said this last night. I'll say it again. No matter who wins this election, look at this. 69 million votes for Joe Biden so far, 66 million, 66.4 for President Trump. They're still counting votes. So these totals are going to go higher. You see, Joe Biden's leading with 69, right? Hillary Clinton won the popular vote last time with 65.8. More Americans voted in this election. That's a good thing, no matter who wins, right? So we come back to this election here. Counting. Maybe it's a civics lesson for people who haven't seen close elections and haven't been inside those rooms, but those are decent people trying to count ballots. Yes, some of them are Democrats, some of them are Republicans. That's not what they're doing. They're Americans sitting there counting the ballots. So let's see where she was. She was in Wayne County in Michigan.
Right,
Joe Biden right now.
They're saying 100,000 votes, about 100,000 votes still to be counted in Michigan. So do we know, is it mostly Wayne County?
We know a lot of them are in Wayne County because that's the largest jurisdiction in the state. So remember what you just said. We need to count them. We can also use our common sense. Joe Biden is ahead by 31,261. If there are 100,000 left, Donald Trump needs to win 2/3 of those. I'm doing this on the fly, but in that ballpark to catch up. Well, that's really hard to do if a lot of them are from Wayne County, where Joe Biden right now is getting 67% of the vote. So there's just basic common sense there about the trajectory. Now, sometimes the count defies common sense, right? Sometimes there's a surge. There's something we don't know about. So let's count them. There's no shame in counting them. But this is why the Biden campaign is optimistic about this, because of where the votes are still being counted, the lead they have right now, the data that everybody has. Both campaigns have this. The Trump campaign knows this. That's why the president came out in that mood last night. They know the votes still to be counted in Michigan most likely are going to be disproportionately for Joe Biden. They know the votes still to be counted in Wisconsin are likely to be because they're early mail-in ballots, and we know Democrats by disproportionate numbers voted early. Most of the ballots still to be counted are those, and we know they're disproportionately for Joe Biden. And even over here, where the president's lead at the moment, 481,678, that seems like a big lead, and it is. But there are more votes to be counted, and we know from the data, and we know from what we've seen so far in the counties where they're missing, including down here in Philadelphia County, they tend to be overwhelming for Joe Biden. Yeah. This is a steep hill for Biden to climb to come back in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but it is doable because we know the number of ballots that are outstanding, and we know roughly from what we've seen in the ballots that have already been counted, the percentage Joe Biden is getting. If he can match that percentage in the ballots as they count them, he can get back in the game here as well. But again, when you hear now the tension from the campaigns, I just want to walk back over here, the Trump campaign is essentially saying, please stop counting votes here. We don't like that you counted votes overnight here. We don't like that you counted votes overnight here. But, excuse me, can you keep counting votes out here, and can you keep counting votes out here? Again, set the politics aside, because that's politics because of the math. The math is trending against them right now, so they're trying to argue in places where they're hurting, and they're trying to keep the door open. They're hoping that something brings them back because they're very close. And you know what, Anderson? The math tells you the trajectory in Arizona and Nevada is not going their way. But that's okay. They have every right to ask people to look closely. The Trump campaign does, the Biden campaign does. I wish they would turn down the volume, but I'm naive to think they will.
But just to be clear, in some of these states, the reason they are still counting votes is that the legislatures in those states, Republican control, did not allow them to to process them earlier.
Yes, in both Michigan and Wisconsin, you have a situation where you have Democratic governors and Republican, at least one chamber of the legislature controlled by the Republicans. And the governors had asked the secretaries of state, Secretary of State Benson from Michigan was on earlier. I've spoken to her repeatedly over the last several months, and she kept saying, we're heading in for this scenario, right? The scenario that's going to make it more controversial, more open to people criticizing it. I think it is fantastic that it's transparent and our correspondence and everybody's correspondence. And again, Republicans and Democrats too. It's not just the news media in the room watching the votes being counted. Democrats and Republicans have people in there too to watch. That is how it works. But yes, they had asked some time ago, could the legislature please help? Well, let me put another question on another point on the table too. We have known for months that we could end up in this scenario. Right? One of the things that the conversations in Washington, when they were debating a coronavirus stimulus, do you give states more aid to help with this? Do you surge more resources in to help the post office? Did any of that happen from this town? No. It's not all the president's fault, but he had no interest in doing anything that was going to help with the vote count, help with the post office. That was a non-starter at the Trump White House. So here we are. And guess what? The states know what they're doing. They'll count the votes.
All right, John, stand by. Let's go to Aaron.
All right, and let's go to Gloria here and Abby, just as we start to see some of these gray pieces fill in, right? Small pieces of the puzzle as we wait, coming in bit by bit. Now we have a sense of part of Maine. Gloria, what are you hearing from the Biden campaign?
Well, look, just like you're hearing from the Trump campaign, I think they're saying they're very confident. They believe that if they don't win Pennsylvania, they think they need to win Pennsylvania. Obviously, they'd like to win Pennsylvania. If they don't get Pennsylvania or Georgia, they're very, very confident about Nevada. They're very confident about Arizona. So they think they're on the way. I've been talking to a couple of people this morning, though, about this notion of Trump deciding to take it to the court, because the Democrats have been there before. Yeah. They have been there before 20 years ago. It did not go well for them when it was taken to the Supreme Court. But what was talked about 20 years ago is what you were talking about now, which is counting the votes versus stopping counting the votes. And so what they say is that Republicans are throwing up roadblocks in state after state. You have a president of the United States who has effectively said, stop counting, which, as we all know, is anti-democratic. And the Democrats are wondering, as am I, when some Republican will publicly come out and say, this is ridiculous, not whispering privately to journalists, not whispering privately to each other, but when is someone going to come out and say, Mr. President, this is a democracy. We need to count the votes because, after all, in the state of Michigan, for example, last time, you only won by 10,000 votes. What are you going to say about that? In the state of Wisconsin, you won by 22,000 votes. So you have no right to say any of this until all the votes are counted. And, they're not going to get through to him because, of course, he's still claiming that in the last election he won the popular vote, which we know he did not.
Right, he's going to hold and of course 2.8 million advantage right now in the popular vote as we have it right now for Joe Biden.
Yep.
Abby, when you look at these numbers, so to Gloria's point, Abby, Mitch McConnell spoke just a moment ago, or not a moment ago, within the past hour, right, as he's won, and his comment was, claiming you win the election is different from finishing the count. That's about the strongest thing that we've heard on the record from a Republican at this hour, Abby, looking at these numbers coming in, looking at the votes as they're tabulated, and looking at that popular vote margin in favor of Biden.
Yeah, I mean, it's something. I would say that we need to wait and see what continues to happen as this week goes on, because there are a lot of Republicans, even in the United States Senate, who have tacitly approved of the president's stated strategy, which would be to take this to the Supreme Court to litigate the validity of a certain type of ballot, mail-in ballots specifically. Not because there's anything necessarily wrong or proven to be fraudulent, but just because they are mail-in ballots. So until I start to see Republicans speaking out about that, I'm going to reserve judgment on that situation. Look, I think that this is a divided country. We have repeatedly seen the winner of the presidential contest with the electoral votes not necessarily being the person who wins the popular vote count. Now, for the Democratic Party, this is something that has particularly affected them. It angers a lot of Democrats. But I think the question for the Democratic Party today, if Joe Biden does, in fact, if he does pull this out, even if he does pull this out, they have a big question before them, which is how do they become more solidly competitive in these battleground states so that we're not always in these types of squeaker situations? I've been talking to a lot of Democrats and a lot of Republicans who say, look, this result is going to be what it is, but both parties are going to have to do a lot of soul searching about what happens next, because, these kinds of margins, 10,000 votes, 30,000 votes in 3 or 4 states, it's an unsustainable situation.
It really is. And as you know, 1 year it's 10,000, 1 year it's 30. It's razor thin when you're talking about millions of votes. Gloria, some context crucial here when you look at Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, right? All with GOP-controlled legislatures that weren't able to start counting those early and absentee ballots, right? Early, okay? So here we are. And yet, the sense of things that we're getting from Wisconsin and Michigan is a lot more colored in on the map than it is in Pennsylvania. Okay, it's a lot slower. What's going on?
Well, in Pennsylvania, it was a really complicated situation. But what I would say is it's a failure of the legislature to do what it should have done. The Republicans and Democrats were arguing over when you could start the count. And they thought they had an agreement. It fell apart because people on the Republican side, I'm told, were adding other things into the agreement. And so as a result, instead of being able to at least start opening envelopes, putting them in some order, doing what they needed to do, they ended up in many counties starting late. And when you start late, this is what occurs. There was no trust on either side in the legislature. They're pointing fingers at each other. But the result is that Pennsylvania is now in a situation where it is not counting its ballots as quickly as it needs to. Look, I personally believe the American public can wait a couple of days. Everybody is very anxious.
Yep.
In Bush Gore, it took 36 days, and it did go to the Supreme Court. But what you have now is a situation that is inflamed by the President of the United States. During Bush Gore, while they were arguing different sides, the candidates, nobody charged the other side saying, this is stealing the election if you count these votes. They disagreed on what you ought to count and how long that ought to take and what counties ought to be counted. But at this point, they weren't saying that someone was stealing the election and inflaming the electorate.
Right. Ballot dumping and things as he has alleged in just the past few hours. All right. Thank you both, Abby, Gloria. And we are expecting to hear from Wisconsin officials shortly about the vote counting there, the very latest. And next, this one could keep us all in suspense until tomorrow. New reporting out of Nevada. Wait till you hear this on their count. That and more. Our live coverage continues.
And there is a key race alert that shows that President Trump's lead has narrowed a bit in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and in Georgia as well. Pennsylvania now, the president still leading with 472,623 votes. But that is actually, Vice President Biden has gained about 70,000 votes, eating into President Trump's lead. Also in Georgia, the president still ahead with 87,608 votes. But in just the last few moments, as more votes are being counted, Vice President Biden has gained about 15,000 votes in the state of Georgia. So narrowing the lead for the president in both Pennsylvania and Georgia. More votes still to be counted. Erica Hill is standing by in Nevada with some information about when we may see more votes there. Erica?
Yeah, a lot of questions, Anderson, about these 6 electoral votes in Nevada. And the Secretary of State made it very clear this morning, we're not going to get more results from the Secretary of State for another 24 hours, not until 9 a.m. on Thursday. And as we look at the numbers right now, this is a very tight race between Joe Biden and Donald Trump here in Nevada. What folks are really focused on are these mail-in ballots. Keep in mind, for the first time ever, the state sent a ballot to every active voter because of COVID in the state. So we know that a number of those were returned, more than 600,000, but a number of people also showed up to vote. Really strong early voter turnout. Early voting lasted for 2 weeks here in Nevada. We had about 84,000 voters come out just in Clark County alone yesterday. And the real focus is on Clark County because this is home, Anderson, to about 70% of active voters in the state. It leans heavily Democratic. And as people watch that, they want to know where the split is. Right now, Joe Biden also leading among votes tabulated here in Clark County. But again, it's those mail-in ballots. So in Nevada, as long as that ballot is postmarked by Election Day, so as long as it was postmarked yesterday, it can arrive through November 10th and still be counted. And there are a couple of days built in, too, in case there are issues with that ballot, in case the signature needs to be cured. So as for when we'll know, yes, we're going to get more information from the Secretary of State tomorrow. Counties will likely be updating today as well. But we may not have that final count for another few days because we simply don't know how many mail-in ballots could still be coming in.
All right. Fascinating. Erica Hill, appreciate that. We are awaiting word from the Secretary of State in Wisconsin for an update on the ballots in Wisconsin on what ballots still need to be looked at. Let's go back to John King. John, let's talk about Pennsylvania and Georgia and Nevada. Whichever one you want to start with, let's maybe Nevada, since we were just there with Erica Hill. It is a tight race there. Where are the votes still to be counted?
West to east in this hour, Anderson. We're going to keep counting them throughout the day. As Erica just very smartly noted, look, if you look at the math right now, this is pretty close, right? Very close. 7,647 vote lead for Joe Biden, 49.3 to 48.7. So the Trump campaign says, let's keep counting, and they have every right to do so. Let's see if they have consistency when we come east. But to Erica's point, most of your votes, more than 70% of your votes, 72, 73% of your votes are going to come right out of here, Clark County. This is Las Vegas and among the fastest growing suburbs in America around it right here. This is where, again, more than 7 in 10 votes are going to come right here out of this county. Joe Biden winning 53 to 45. If you look at it right now, about 84% in Clark County. That means a giant chunk of votes coming out of a predominantly Democratic area, and they are mail-in votes, which we know are going toward Joe Biden. So every reason for the Biden campaign to think you're going to grow here. Second largest county in the state is Washoe, up here in the western part of the state, Reno, and then the lands above it. When you get further north, this gets more rural and more Republican. But down in Reno in the suburbs now, you see it's pretty close. This used to be a swing area. It leans Democratic now, but 51 to 47 there, about 11% more. So the bulk of the votes are in the two big population centers, the Reno area and around it, the Vegas area and around it. Joe Biden ahead by 7,000 votes. Again, common sense tells you you're leading and you have mail-in ballots, you're likely, even if they just split like this, but we count them. That's why we count them. And the Trump campaign has every right to say, let's wait this one out and see how it goes. Let's move to the east as we come. And again, that's the intellectual inconsistency, if you will. They say keep going out there, and they're close, and they have every right to say that, but they want to stop here because they're ahead. 472,000 votes right now, 472,623. That's a healthy lead, especially when you see 80% there. The question is, where's the 20% you're missing? And the Secretary of State in Pennsylvania tells us about 1 million ballots still to be counted. This is a rolling number, so if I say something now, they may have counted some ballots in the last 10 minutes or so, but a big chunk, about 1 million votes still to be counted. A lot of them come from here. And again, you have to use your common sense at home, no matter who you support in this election. You got 60% of the vote, just above it, counted in Philadelphia. It's always blue. It will be blue for the foreseeable future. You've got Joe Biden winning with 78% when you round up. The president at 22 if you round up. A lot of votes to be counted here. So we'll see as this goes by. Go ahead, Anderson.
John, we're hearing from Wisconsin election officials. Let's listen.
Valid ballot has been counted and reported accurately. Today, the Wisconsin Elections Commission staff will be standing ready to assist clerks as they start the process of triple checking the results. The statutorily required canvass process begins today before we can certify those results. This includes the random selection of 5% of voting equipment that's used in this election, which must be audited to make sure that the paper tally is the same as the voting equipment. So all those things have to happen before we have certified results. Yesterday's voting process and election night counting went very well in Wisconsin and across the country. Despite more absentee ballots, the evening proceeded in a very normal fashion. Our election was executed with precision, and it's also, every step of the process is publicly observable. And I think that's really important. Every step of the elections process is publicly observable. You can observe election day and voters casting their ballot. You can observe the votes being tallied at night. The voter registration records are public information. The absentee data is public information. Each of the results are posted on the county's websites. So again, our job as election administrators is to follow the law. And what the law says that on election night, that each municipality submits their unofficial results, unofficial being the key word, to their county, and the county then posts the unofficial results by reporting unit on their website. There is no certified election night aggregate of results. That is according to state law. That is not a process that we made up or adopted. That is according to state law, and we followed state law. Part of democracy is following the laws that have been prescribed by our elected lawmakers. And the elected lawmakers have prescribed this process for canvassing in our jurisdictions. I'm incredibly proud of the work done by Wisconsin's election officials, and I feel 100% confident in the election that they conducted, and that the laws that are established by our elected lawmakers were followed in yesterday's election. So there's no calling elections at the state level, right? That's called certification. And certification is a very meticulous, careful process that commences with the certification at the state level on December 1st. Up until that point, there is no statewide aggregate. There is no calling the election. Any of those predictions that you're hearing are predictions by the media and other groups based on unofficial results. And I just think that's so important. And I know for so many of us, we've spent the last few months talking about this on end, talking about the mechanics of how the process works. And so I think, as we head into today, it's really important to continue to convey that message that we've all been working so hard to understand exactly how the process works and bring those mechanical facts to Wisconsin voters. Unfortunately, earlier this morning, I may have misspoken about all of the unofficial results being in from our municipal clerks around the state. So again, we have 1,850 municipal clerks around the state. And it looks like, according to looking through, again, all those county websites, that every single one of those jurisdictions has submitted their unofficial results, except for one tiny township of less than 300 voters. And they're working to get their ballots finished and counted and posted as we speak. And so beyond that, we have no reason to believe that there are any other ballots that have not yet been counted and included as part of those unofficial totals. But again, the canvass process, so important, right? The canvass process is where the municipal election officials double check all of the results to make sure that they have the correct number of registrations, to make sure that everything checks out. Then the counties, they do the same. So today at 4 o'clock is actually the deadline for the municipalities to start their canvas process and to then route the materials over to the counties where they start their certification process at the county level. They again do those double checks. All this publicly observable. You can go watch in your local communities. If you're skeptical about the process, engage. You can go watch the process in your local community. And so then it goes to the county level. They do their double checks. From there, it comes to the state. By state law, on December 1st, at the public meeting of the Wisconsin Elections Commission, is when those results are certified. And that's when we will have the official winner. We'll have the official results of the election at that December 1st meeting as prescribed by state law. And so with that, I don't know, Reed, if you had any other background you want to lend, then we can open it up for some questions.
Sure.
Okay, you've been listening to Wisconsin officials talking about the elections, the state of the race there. John King, correct me if I'm wrong, essentially she is saying there are no more ballots, no more votes really to count, except for in one township that there may be about 300 or so votes. Right now, Vice President Biden has a lead of about 20,000 votes in Wisconsin.
Right, that is what she said. And what you just heard there was very refreshing and very revealing. Refreshing in the sense that, again, the state election officials feel the need to talk about how transparent this process is, how normal this process is. Even though we're going into overtime, if you will, the day after, we're counting votes, right? We're not done. This is what happens in the close elections. So that's refreshing to talk about the transparency. Everybody can watch this. The media can watch it. Individual citizens can watch it. Both campaigns, again, both parties are represented in every room where they're counting ballots. The revealing part, she said, December 1st is when they certify the results in Wisconsin. Because of this, 20,697. Again, as she noted, every county now goes back and does a sort of a systems check, a quality control check. You check some machines, some of your machines, a percentage of them, and you match it up with what you reported. And you say, okay, everything matches up. Or, that's a little off. Let's go back and double check something. All the counties will go through that today. That's what happens in every election in America on the morning after, every time. Nothing unusual. So she says we're just about done. So that means if Joe Biden has if that holds up, 20,697 votes, maybe a few more hundred to come in, but you're largely counted here. So you pop up here again, Milwaukee County, we have it at 95%. The county may change those numbers, but if this is the count, what she just said, the most interesting part there is they don't certify it. She does not call the election. Sometimes the media make projections. She will certify this on December 1st. December 1st. So if we're going to have legal challenges, if we're going to have lawsuits, if we're going to have challenges and processes, or if the Trump campaign wants to request a recount, you have to wait until the state certifies the results. Then you do that. So if we are in an uncertain period where if this holds up, 20,000 there, again, I'm going to walk over here. If that holds up and you have this here, Wisconsin holds, if the Michigan lead holds, if the Arizona lead holds, and the Nevada lead holds, that gets Joe Biden to 270, Anderson, just that. We're still counting in Pennsylvania. We're still waiting to get the rest in North Carolina. Georgia officials say that one's getting closer, some important votes to count in Democratic counties. But with Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Nevada, if those leads hold, Joe Biden is leading in all four of those I just told you, that would get Joe Biden to 270. It would get him to 270 in our math, and it would get him to 270 in the publicly available results that we have over here. It's not certified. And so that's when you get into the process of what could be, I'm going to say, interesting and contentious next several days and potentially several weeks. Again, every campaign has the legal right to double check the ballots. Every campaign can look at state law. Can you request a recount? There's nothing wrong with that, and we should be patient and walk through that. But the fact that the state doesn't certify it until December 1st, we're in a little bit of limbo here.
Yeah. Well, when we come back to you, John, let's look at Arizona and Nevada, and obviously also in Wisconsin and Michigan, and see where any votes that are left, where they are, what kind of counties they are left to be counted in. Right now, let's go back to Aaron.
All right, yeah, and it was, as we try to, wait on these states, fill in these gray states into the color they will be. I want to go to the Georgia Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. Secretary, thank you very much for being with me. So, look, Georgia, we're still waiting. Where does the counting stand right now?
Well, right now, we're finishing up that process. There's probably about in the order of about 200,000 ballots that yet to be counted, and we're pushing the counties really hard to finish that up today.
So you want to finish up today? I want to just understand where those 200,000 are, if we could. 200,000, you're saying still outstanding. I know we had just heard about 74,000 of those come from Fulton County near Atlanta. Do you know really where all those 200,000 come from?
Well, the larger numbers are from the larger populated counties, so Fulton, DeKalb, Cobb County has a few, and then some of the fast-growing counties have like 7,000. So it's really statewide, but they're working really diligently today to finish up and get all the absentee ballots scanned and tabulated.
Look, in Georgia, I know there's no automatic recount law, but you can get a recount requested if the margin is equal or to or less than 0.5%, a half of 1%. Is my understanding correct? And do you think that you're going to be in those margins and this could happen?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if we have that, particularly for a state house or a state senate, just because sometimes those elections are with 100 or 200 votes. So it's very possible we'll have those. But then we also could have that for a congressional seat or even a U.S. Senate, and perhaps a presidential. But we'll face that if it comes to it. But within 0.5%, the candidate that's short by that amount, they can request a recount, and we can do that.
All right. Well, as you said, by the end of the day is the bottom line. You hope that we will have a full answer from Georgia, correct?
That's what we're pushing for.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Secretary Raffensperger. You heard him there by the end of the day, and still 200,000 of those absentees yet to count. About 74,000 of them coming from Fulton County with Atlanta. And next, a live report on some of the issues that have plagued ballots, especially those carried by the U.S. Postal Service. So we have new figures on how many votes may not make it in by the state deadlines, right? You had to be received by a certain date, or your vote doesn't count. We'll be right back.
With the president now complaining about the mail-in vote, as he has been, and a federal court is getting new data on how shockingly slow the delivery of those ballots have been. It is breaking news. CNN's Ana Cabrera has that for us. Ana?
Anderson, a federal judge saying just moments ago he needs answers, going so far as to say the Postmaster General may need to be deposed or testify under oath. Now, this is all as new court filings show there were a significant amount of ballots that did not move on time on Election Day. Let's take a look at the key state of Pennsylvania, where we learned only 62% of the ballots in the central Pennsylvania USPS district and only 67% in the Philadelphia Metro USPS district were processed on time. And now we've learned this affected 13,411 ballots in those districts. Now, thankfully, in Pennsylvania, ballots are allowed to arrive up until Friday, 3 days after Election Day, as long as they're postmarked by Election Day. But in 6 of the battleground states with low processing scores, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, Florida, New Hampshire, and Maine, they do not allow ballots to arrive after Election Day. So this means some ballots may not have arrived on time to be counted. And in 3 of these states that we just mentioned, of those 6 states that are still battlegrounds where there was that low processing score, 3 of them have yet to be called: Michigan, Wisconsin, and Georgia. It's unclear, though, how many ballots in those states specifically may have been affected, but this really matters. 2/3 of voters in Michigan voted absentee or by mail, according to the Secretary of State there. And think about the slim margin we're seeing in a state like Wisconsin. 97% of the vote counted there. Biden is leading by only about 20,000 votes. Anderson, every vote counts, and we just learned there are ongoing sweeps right now being done at some of these USPS processing facilities in battleground states. We'll, of course, keep you posted, especially if we learn more as this court hearing continues.
A judge had previously said that they had to do sweeps before the election. Do we know, were those done?
Well, some of them were done, but they weren't completed on time, and that was a big part of the problem. As far as we know, based on the reporting we have, only 13 ballots were identified in those sweeps. But again, the judge unhappy because the sweeps weren't done on time, and we do know that the processing has been slow in so many of these battleground states. Anderson.
Ana Cabrera, appreciate the update. New reporting just in on Wisconsin. We've just learned that the Trump campaign is saying that they are going to contest the outcome in Wisconsin. Let's go to CNN's John Harwood for details. John?
Great.
John's not ready yet. This is just coming in. Let's go to David Shalian, who's standing by. David, the Trump campaign saying they're going to contest in Wisconsin.
Yeah, here's the statement from campaign manager Bill Stepien. I'm just going to read it, Anderson. It says, the president is well within the threshold to request a recount, and we will immediately do so. The campaign goes on to complain that it's a razor-thin race. We knew it would be, and there have been reports of irregularities, they claim, in several Wisconsin counties, which raise doubts about the validity of the results. That's what the Trump campaign is claiming. We know that in Wisconsin, if the margin between the candidates is less than 1%, certainly the losing candidate can indeed request a recount, Anderson. It doesn't necessarily mean that much may change. I mean, in 2016, I think Jill Stein requested a recount, and I don't think many votes shifted at all after that recount. And that was when Donald Trump won the state by about a similar vote margin, some 20,000 votes, that he's losing it right now. And I think we heard the Wisconsin elections officials say they only have about 300 votes left to actually count. So this is a near complete initial count that we're seeing in Wisconsin.
Right. The election official in Wisconsin was saying that there's only one township that hasn't sent in their results, and in that township there's only about 300 votes outstanding. At last count in Wisconsin, as you see there on your screen, Vice President Biden is up by a little bit more than 20,000 votes. And Wisconsin says essentially the votes have been counted. We'll see how what the state says on the recount. John Harwood is standing by as well, monitoring events from the White House where the Trump campaign is headquartered. John?
Anderson, one thing we need to point out is that you can't make a formal request for a recount until 10 days after the votes have been canvassed. There's a review process. At the end of that 10-day process, then they can formally request a recount. It's also worth pointing out that the Trump campaign in 2016, after winning Wisconsin by a narrow margin over Hillary Clinton, opposed having a recount, which ended up not making all that much difference. So obviously a turnabout here, but this is a legal strategy that the Trump campaign can avail itself of, and they are going to avail themselves of that strategy while trying to simultaneously continue counting votes in Arizona, where it might help them, stop the counting of votes in Pennsylvania, where it could hurt them.
Yeah, I want to go to Fernita Tolson, CNN legal analyst. Fernita, just in terms of how recounts work, about the Trump administration, or I should say the Trump campaign requesting a recount, what's the legality on this?
Well, first, Anderson, thank you for having me. Let me emphasize, though, that this is still part of a normal process. When you have two candidates that are as close as Vice President Joe Biden and President Trump, it is normal for the campaign that's trailing to request a recount. And so in Wisconsin, the margin is still within 1%. So it's not unusual that the Trump campaign has articulated their desire to request a recount. What it does do, though, is it drags out the process a little bit. But maybe we should normalize patience, right? We have been saying for months now that, this process would have to play out. The votes would have to be counted. It is unlikely that we would know who the president is on election night. And I just view this as part of that larger narrative that it may be a few days before and possibly weeks before we know who the president is. This recount process is part of the broader selection process of choosing a president.
Yeah, and John Harder was saying 10 days, it has to be, the official request has to be 10 days from now or from the election. Generally, how long does a recount take?
It can drag out. So in 2000, with the dispute over Bush versus Gore, it was 34 days before we had any resolution in that dispute. There have been Senate races, Coleman Franken, for example, where it took some months before we knew who won that seat. So it just really depends. It depends on how close the margin is. It depends on the disputed ballots. It depends on how contentious the race is, because the more contentious it is, the more lawyers involved, the more heavily litigated it is. So there are a number of things that are still up in the air that could determine what happens in Wisconsin, for example.
Fernita Tolson, I appreciate it. Thanks. Great having you. Votes still being counted at this hour in several states, too close to call. What does it mean in the race for 270 electoral votes? Well, we're keeping an eye on all of that with John King. We'll go back to him shortly. CNN Special Live coverage continues right after this.